The main character, struggling to see, looks down and sees everything is red. With a blade sticking out of his chest and gasping for air, he realizes that only death remains around him. As he wonders why all this bloodshed was needed, he turns and spots one of his friends lying dead. His brother Jamin, his friends, and all the disciples were gone, dead right there. The alliance of 20 sects, made up of the strongest fighters, had come together for a final showdown against Tiama. But in the end, both sides were wiped out, and the one to blame was the guy sitting on the heap of bodies. The demon who fell from the sky and drenched the land in blood, the leader of the cult called Chiyama. Chiyama taunts the disciple from Manhua, saying it's a shame he's in this mess. The protagonist glares at him and tries to get up, coughing up blood as Chiyama points out that even if he survived this fight, the glory he dreamed of is out of reach. They both knew this was the end for them. The protagonist tells him to shut it, but from his throne of corpses, Chiyama reaches out and says he should be proud of this. Even though many helped him in this last fight, it was his blade that struck the final blow. As the leader of the demonic cult, he admits that Manhua's blade is the strongest on Earth. The protagonist yells for him to be quiet again, and charges at the demon, who says it's a pity because with just one more day, he could have earned the name Chinama. But he brushes it off and tells the Manhua disciple to remember this. This wasn't the end. The demonic forces would come back, and when they did, the world would fall under the cult's control. The protagonist raises his sword as Chiyama claims that when that day arrives, he'll be unstoppable. A slash cuts through, leaving a mark on the demon's neck. He vanishes, and his head rolls down the pile of bodies. From on top, the protagonist declares that the war is finally over. But he already knew his life was also over. What he wanted to find out was what would happen to Mount Hoa now. All the strongest members who had fought in this battle were dead. The only ones left in that sect were kids who barely knew how to wield a sword. He couldn't even tell if all this bloodshed had meant anything in the end. He wonders if he trained a bit harder. Could he have saved at least one of them? But that didn't matter anymore. Lying on the pile, he thinks that in the end it was all pointless. Even the brightest blooms eventually decay. The protagonist was the 13th disciple of Mount Hua and the strongest swordsman alive, known as the Master of the Blossoming Blade, Chang Maang. He had finally taken down the demon who wreaked havoc on the land. But in the end, he died on top of the 100,000 mountain peaks. That was the legacy he should have left behind. Before all this, a baby was abandoned at Mount Hua. 2 old folks came by and picked him up from the ground. Later on, he was practicing his sword skills. One of the teachers calls out to Chang Weiyang, while his mind wonders what those visions were. The teacher scolds him, saying that as a martial arts trainee, he should stick to the right path and avoid violence. Back then, he felt pretty angry since he was always getting yelled at. The truth is, even though he was part of the sect, he didn't really take the teaching seriously. Even with the title of Swordmaster, he should have remembered that without Mount Hua, he wouldn't have anything in this life. One of the sect masters asks if he has any regrets. Deep in his thoughts, Chang Yung replies yes. He has countless regrets and wishes he had paid more attention to the sect's teachings. Maybe if he had, he could have become a stronger fighter and changed how things turned out. But then Jaemon chimes in, saying there's no need for regrets since everything is part of the Mount Hua sect's fate, and he believes they'll keep going strong. The scene shifts to a boy getting whacked on the head. Inside a tent, there's a heated argument. A boy is trying to defend himself, asking where Chiyama is. The guy in front of him wants to know what he wants with Chiyama. The boy with a stick on his back claims he doesn't know who Chiyama is and calls himself a filthy street rat. Everyone's demanding money, but he's just lying there like he owns the place. The boy is totally confused, wondering what's going on, since it seems like a beggar is threatening him. The boy who just woke up tells the guy to drop the stick before he gets hurt, but the guy just laughs, making him even more desperate as the boy on the ground starts to lose his cool. He says that even the leader of the beggars shouldn't treat him like this, then raises his arm, realizing he's in trouble. The protagonist reaches out, saying he needs to teach this guy a lesson, but then he notices something off. The stick comes down, and while he wonders why the arm looks so small, he realizes he can't block it and gets hit on the head again. The guy mocks him, calling him shameless, and starts hitting him over and over. At that moment, someone else tries to jump in, but seeing the beating, they decide to back off. Later, the boy is sitting by a river with a bloody nose, saying he hasn't been beaten this badly since his time at Mount Hua. But one day, he'll get back at that jerk, then he goes quiet and looks down, wondering who the kid in the water's reflection is. It felt like one of those reincarnation things Buddhists talk about. He thinks that if that's true, he should have been reborn at Mount Shaolin. Someone shows up behind him. The boy calls out, and Changmyang mentions he saw him watching the fight and running away afterward. The boy apologizes, saying Wang Cho can be like that sometimes, but today he really crossed the line. Suddenly, the protagonist raises a finger and says he has a question. Actually, he has two questions. They lock eyes, and the boy looks confused. The air goes silent, and Xiang Myung asks if he's a beggar. The boy replies, saying it's pretty obvious just by looking at his clothes. Xiang Myung crouches down in frustration, asking what kind of curse this reincarnation is. Then he stands up and moves on to the second question, mentioning Qian Myung and asking if the boy knows who that is. The boy replies that it sounds like the beating was enough to drive him nuts. Qiao demands an answer. The boy crosses his arms and says he's heard the name. As far as he knows, that was the big leader of the demonic clan who died 100 years ago. Qiao Mayang is stunned, wondering what kind of story this is about something from a century ago. He grabs the boy by the collar, asking if that's true. Hesitant, the boy asks why he would lie about something so ridiculous. The protagonist lets go, shocked that 100 years have passed. Apparently, he was reborn not long after he died. In a way, it felt like he returned to a world where he was all alone. As he feels down, Hua asks if he's all right. That's when Chang Maoyang remembers Mount Hua. He mentions Mount Hua and asks what happened to it. The boy looks confused and asks what that is. Chang Maoyang gets even more worried. He questions if the boy is a beggar, and the boy confirms he is. Chang Maoyang points out that beggars should know about the Gai Bong sect. So why doesn't he know about Mount Hua, one of the top 10 sects? The boy is baffled and asks what he's talking about. He lists the names of the 10 great sects and says none of them are called Mount Hua. Chang Maoyang can't believe this. How could the sect he helped build disappear completely? He grabs the boy again, and the boy wonders if he's about to get shaken again. The protagonist shakes him, demanding to know how these weaker sects became the strongest and how Mount Hua could vanish. The boy, a bit shaken, starts to recall the name. He mentions he's heard there's a sect like that in Shanxi. Chang Maoyang perks up, but the boy says it's not one of the top 10. Chang Maoyang thinks hard and says he remembers that sect is in ruins. The poor protagonist can't believe it. How could Mount Hua, once so famous, just disappear? He finally lets go of the boy and says he needs to see it for himself to believe it. He clenches his fists and declares he's going to Mount Hua. The boy finds this funny and tells him he should just go back to begging or he'll starve. Chow Miao tells him to be quiet and warns him he'll have to answer a lot of questions, so he better not lie. He pounds his chest and asks for the boy's name. The boy stands up and asks what kind of beggar has a name. People call him Chosang, but whatever. He then asks how old he is, and the boy replies, "Who knows the age of a beggar?" Chiang Maiyang says that's fine. He just wants to know the name of the boy who hit him. The boy introduces himself as Bu Cho and mentions the leader's name was Zhang Paul. Zhang Mayan then says good deeds come back to you, but revenge hits harder. He tells him to remember the name Zhang Mayan from the Mount Hua sect because one day he'll repay this kindness. He starts to leave, then quickly turns back and asks which way to Mount Hua. A moment later, birds scatter as he rushes through the forest. The issue is, he's getting tired, remembering how in his past life he was faster than a horse. After pushing too hard, he collapses, feeling like a fool, his heart racing. This Dan kid's body can't keep going for even 15 minutes. At this rate, he'll drop dead before getting to Mount Hua. Face down in the dirt, he wonders how he'll reach the Shanxi sect. Then he starts to smile, thinking it's time to use the genius of Master Chang Maiyang. He's pumped, saying this is an amazing chance. Even those at the top have their regrets. One of his regrets was being lazy when he was younger. He never listened to the elders and always tried to dodge training, just wanting to escape. Plus, he used to swipe his teacher's drinks, which made them really mad. But he wasn't planning to change that this time around. He walks over to a tree, thinking that it's really just about starting fresh. First, he needed a distraction-free spot, and this seemed like a decent choice. He sits down in front of the tree, trying to recall the right technique for this moment. He knew tons of ways to boost his energy, many of which went beyond what Mount Hua taught. Still, he wasn't sure which one to tackle first. Then he remembers a technique called the 6 Elements, a cheap book sold for 5 coins at street stalls, known for being low quality. Still, it was actually a solid technique. The 6 Elements was the first thing the Mount Hua disciples learned. It wasn't anything special, but it helped purify the practitioner's body. It was a basic technique for those not in a rush, perfect for someone wanting to build a strong foundation. He starts slowly gathering energy within himself. Strange roots seem to rise through him as he purifies the sky. Bit by bit, he collects this purified energy in the center of his body. That tiny point of power marked the start of his whole journey in this life. He gets up saying this seed will kick off an unstoppable avalanche. But as he stands, he collapses back down, realizing he used up all his energy just for that. He remembers Brother Jaemon always saying he needed to think things through better. Lying on the ground, he wonders how he's going to make it to Manhua at this rate. The scene shifts to a busy city. The boys dash into an alley, calling for their brother and warning him that another beggar is asking for money, so they're running low on coins. It was a very young kid, and everyone was giving him money because of that. The Mohawk guy stands up, saying he'll show them how things work around here. He gets pumped and tells everyone to follow him. A little later, a small boy is seen in the corner of a wall eating. Obviously, it was Chang Mayong. The guys shout at him, telling him to stop pretending he can't hear them. Our boy looks back and asks if they're talking to him. The Mohawk guy says of course, since no one else is around, and asks if he wants to get hurt. He warns him that he can't beg in other people's territory, so he better hand over everything he has, including the food in his hand. Chang Mai-an looks at his hand and calls them a bunch of greedy jerks for wanting even what he's already bitten. The guys crack their knuckles, saying he needs a lesson. But Chang Mai-yang just stands up, throws a small punch, and says he's fine. He looks at them and warns that he's not very strong yet, but it's enough. He's already getting used to this body and doesn't have time to waste, so they should all come at him at once. The beggar nearly explodes with anger, saying he was thinking about going easy on him. But he changes his mind and tells everyone to take the kid down. The first one reaches out to punch, but Chong Mian easily dodges. He looks at him, clenches his fist, and hits him on the cheek. The guy goes flying, and our boy asks if they know who he is. He's the master of the blossoming blade known as Chiang Mayang from the great Manhua Sect. With that, the fight kicks off, and after a while, they end up apologizing. Our boy tells them not to call him sir, because he's just a beggar too. The guy calls him a beggar, and our boy asks what kind of disrespect that is. After a moment, he shrugs and asks for the fastest way to Shanxi. The guy thinks that's an easy one, but if they were smart, they wouldn't be out begging. Chang Mayang laughs, saying that makes total sense. They all chuckle at each other until he grabs the guy by the collar and warns him to learn some geography by their next meeting. He warns that if he ever asks a question and doesn't know the answer, it'll hurt. At that moment, the beggars scatter as Chong Mayang tells them to get lost. The scene shifts to a sunset behind the mountains. An old man is taking in the view when someone calls for the sect leader. The newcomer introduces himself as Yunim, and the leader invites him in. He shows up, apologizing, but mentions there's a kid who wants to see the leader. The man looks puzzled but checks who's asking for him. The kid says he's Chiang Mayang and wants to join the Manhua sect. The old man seems really confused and asks Yun M if he didn't tell the kid they weren't taking any more disciples. Yun M says he did, but the kid was really insistent about seeing the leader. Chong Mai-young stands there smiling, but inside he's boiling with anger over what just happened. Earlier, he had finally made it to the entrance of Mount Hua. Those annoying beggars had given him a useless shortcut, but he eventually found it. Now, the toughest part was starting, climbing up to the sect. He tackled the stairs, climbed through the mud, and then had to scale the mountain. It was a route he had taken countless times, but now in this body it was no walk in the park. Still, he was determined and finally made it to the top of Mount Hua. But what he found there left him puzzled. In front of the sect, there wasn't even a sign showing the name. He remembered how Brother Chang Mai-an used to clean that cursed name every morning. He barely got there, and already couldn't believe the state of the sect. Just then the door starts to open, and someone asks who he is. It's Hu Ma'am, who finds it odd that a kid showed up there. She immediately wants to know how he managed to climb the mountain by himself. The kid brushes off the question and asks if the man in front of him is a disciple of the Mount Hua sect. The man confirms he is, and our boy feels excited that they weren't completely gone. The man then says he can come in if he wants, and our boy looks a bit confused. The man explains that they don't take visitors, but it's too late for him to head back down. At least he has a place to stay since the nights here can get pretty cold. But as soon as he steps inside, he's shocked by what he sees. The training ground, once an amazing marble arena, is now just an empty field. Luna asks what's wrong, and smiling, he says he's just admiring the incredible training area of the sect. But when he looks to the side, he notices something else that doesn't add up. The Palace of the Heavens, which used to be right next door, has also vanished. Playing dumb, he comments on how strange it is to have a staircase leading to nowhere, and asks what happened. Han M explains that the elders say there used to be a palace there a long time ago. Chong Mai-young thinks to himself that he knows there was a palace. He wants to find out how it disappeared. Hanem says a kid wouldn't understand, but the disappearance is like a glorious battle scar. Our boy thinks to himself that there's nothing glorious about it. The elder asks what he said, and he replies, nothing. With that, Hanem takes the lead, saying he'll show him his new place. As they stroll, Chang Miaowang thinks about how tough it must have been to keep the sect running all these years. They reach the Jade Temple, and our boy feels relieved that at least that's still standing. M starts to open the door and mentions that at Manhua, they follow the path of righteousness. So he first needs to show respect to those who came before. But as soon as he steps inside, he's shocked again. Two things that should have been here are gone. A candle and a golden pot from Emperor Jin, along with a handmade scroll from the ancestors and a golden dragon piece. Now all the treasures are missing. He steps closer and wonders if a flower was supposed to be there. Funame is puzzled and asks how he knows that. He thinks for a moment and recalls there used to be a metal cherry blossom right there. Excited, Xiang Miang wants to know what happened to it. Funam replies that of course they sold it. It wasn't useful and didn't fit the place's vibe. So when a merchant made a good offer, they went ahead and sold it. The protagonist remembers Jaemin and realizes this is sadly the end of the Manhua sect. The petal of the night blooming for fragrance vanished along with all the treasures. And the worst part is that the fools here sold something like that for cash. Anam comes over and asks if he's okay, while Chang Maiyang thinks he needs to fix this mess fast. In that moment, he kneels down and makes a request. He wants to become a disciple of the Manhua sect. Back in the present, the sect leader asks why he wants to join, and if he knows what this place is all about. Our boy simply says yes, he knows. He's sure it won't be easy to get accepted, but he's already got a plan for what he's going to tell him. He remembers a member named Jiang Jing who went missing during the war. He's planning to say that this guy was found on the mountain by a passerby. The man saved him, and as thanks, he taught him Manhua's martial techniques, and he, Chang Huayang, is a descendant of that man. With that story, he'd be a direct disciple of one of the sect's great members, putting him on the same level as the leader. He didn't want to start from scratch here, so he was ready to be turned down and share his little tale. But the leader says he accepts him and doesn't reject him. At that moment, the protagonist is a bit confused. He asks why, and the old man replies that he seems eager to join, so how could he say no? UNM thinks that's odd since they haven't been taking in new members. But the elder says he's changed his mind. For him, destiny works in mysterious ways. Chang Myung wonders why this old man isn't suspicious of him, a total stranger. But the elder just says that no matter the reason, the boy seems to have come to Mount Hoa for a purpose. They never turned away a bird seeking shelter from the rain and always shared food in winter. So they can't reject a child in this situation. He then tells him to show the boy the beginner's room and start the ceremony. But Chang Myung isn't happy about this at all. This way, his amazing position in the sect was just wiped out. The next scene shows him in the robe, the uniform for third-grade disciples. But looking around, he wonders why he's in one of the rooms that used to be for rituals. It didn't feel like just a temporary spot. Back in the old Mount Huol, it wasn't like this. Disciples would get a mentor and live with them. He walks around trying to get a better sense of the place when someone shouts, asking who he is. The protagonist turns around to see a kid asking why he was snooping on others' rooms and if he was a thief. Suddenly, more disciples show up, and one asks Jewel what's happening. He claims he caught this kid poking around the senior brother's room, while the protagonist wonders why he always finds himself in these weird situations. Out of nowhere, another guy appears and asks what's all the commotion about and why they're making noise in the dorm instead of training. Everyone quickly bows and apologizes to the senior brother. He then asks the protagonist who he is, and the protagonist replies that he's Chiang Myung. The man mentions he heard a new Nameless was coming and tells him to take it easy for now. But tomorrow, he'll need to train hard. With that, he tells everyone to rest, and they all shout in agreement. Jio glances back and gives Chiang Myung a cold look, warning him that they'll talk later about manners. Chang Myung feels flustered, thinking these juniors need someone to guide them. He meant to be nice, but that was their issue. The scene shifts to Jewel telling him to take off his robe. Our boy asks what he means, and Jial insists he wants him to strip down. He realizes he's about to face some humiliation and get into a fight, as that's part of the initiation ritual here. The protagonist stays quiet for a moment before asking if senior brother Anjo knows about this. Jewel replies that the senior brother doesn't come around at night and questions if he's looking for a beating to start obeying. Our boy then simply calls out to the senior brother and tells him to brace himself. Just as Jewel is about to ask why, a punch comes flying toward his face. The other disciples look shocked as Jewel hangs from the ceiling. The protagonist questions why they think beating him will teach him a lesson and warns that's exactly what he plans to do. With that, a fight breaks out in the sect. The scene shifts to him calling for senior brother Anjum, asking for a proper massage, while Anjum apologizes, promising to do his best. He then calls for Jojul, telling him to stop shaking and come closer. He has some questions since he's new to the sect, and the boy agrees to answer everything. Our boy wants to know what happened to the Golden Palace and why the Manhua sect went under. Jojul says he'll explain and asks if he's heard of the Master of the Blossoming Blade. Xiangmyang says yes, since that's him. The boy then explains that this is what all the senior brothers talk about. The Master of the Blossoming Blade was the one who took down John Ma, the leader of the demonic cult. After he was killed, the rest of the cult attacked Manhua. The sect was completely wiped out and hasn't bounced back since. Chang Maiyang is shocked and wonders if his failure in that battle caused the whole Manhua sect to fall apart. We then see a flashback of a chat between Chang Maiyang and the sect leader. They first talked about some techniques, and Chang Maiyang suggested getting rid of them because they were useless. Jae-min looked at him and said it was a good idea, and they kept talking. Later in the conversation, Jae-min mentioned he didn't call Chiang Myong just for that reason. He then said he thought it was time for Chiang Lung Myong to take on an apprentice. He asked how he would manage to teach his techniques to a first disciple. Chang Maiyang clenched his fist, saying that would be easy. He would just beat the boy until he learned. Eventually, after enough beatings, he would start to get it. After that, Jae-min never brought up the idea of him taking an apprentice again. At that moment, someone calls him Senior Brother Junior. From his bed, he tells them to drop the formalities and just call him Junior Brother. They then let him know that Senior Brother Yoonjeom wants everyone at the training field soon. Outside, everyone is ready with their swords. Yoonjeom tells them to raise their swords and make the first strike. They all follow suit, while Nam stands next to Chang Maiyang, watching. But our guy looks puzzled and asks what that technique is called. Nam explains that it's called the True Six Elements Sword Technique. It's a basic skill considered the core of all techniques at Manhua. But Chang Maiyang knows this is far from the true foundation of Manhua. They were trying to teach philosophy to someone who didn't even know the basics. This kind of training might give them a quick edge for a bit, but what good is a martial artist without a solid foundation? To make matters worse, the person showing the technique wasn't doing it right. He looks up at the clear sky, which reflects the uncertain future of Manhua. He has no clue where to even start fixing this mess. He then calls out to the boy next to him, who jumps in surprise and asks what's up. Chang Maiyang wants to know what else they're learning here. The boy explains that after this technique, they'll learn the sword technique of the Seven Sages, then move on to the Blossom Hall to study the clarity of the sword technique. Chang Maiyang doesn't seem thrilled about any of this. The boy continues, saying that after that, they'll learn the great sword pacification technique, the pinnacle of Manhua's martial arts. But our guy remembers that Chang Maiyang had kept that technique under wraps because it wasn't effective enough. That was the same technique he had told them to toss out and remove from the library. Now the junk he wanted gone was being seen as the best of this place. He wondered what happened to the Plum Blossom technique of 24 strikes. The instructor keeps scolding them, urging them to take their training seriously. The scene shifts to nighttime, and our boy calls out for Brother Jial. Jial asks what's up, and our boy reminds him to chill out. He then mentions he has a special request and tells Jial to gather everyone at 5 a.m. in the training hall. Besides that, he has a few things to get ready. He starts listing items, saying he wants 5 of each for everyone. A little later, Jial asks if he's sure about this. Chang Maiyang just smiles and asks if Jial thinks he can't handle it. Of course, the boy insists he'll manage just fine. Our boy then tells him to go and says he appreciates how helpful he is, but he stays behind, deep in thought. Right now, Manhua has no money, no techniques, and no talent. No one would be shocked if they close down tomorrow, and all he can offer is talent. The problem is that the third-class disciples are far from being great martial artists. But hey, a great sect isn't built overnight. He'll have to work with these amateurs to bring Manhua back to its former glory. Everyone wakes up at 5 a.m., and naturally, they're all grumpy, wondering why they're following orders from that annoying junior. They ask the seniors how long this is going to last. The two think to themselves that everyone knows they all got beaten. Just then, our boy shows up and asks if anyone was talking about it. Everyone jumps at the sight of him. One of them finally speaks up, asking who he thinks he is to gather everyone at 5 a.m. Our boy pauses for a moment, then tells the guys not to be so angry. He apologizes, saying he totally forgot to think about how everyone felt. He wants to say sorry in person. hoping they can chat a bit inside. He leads the ones who didn't want to train into a room and shuts the door. Outside, the rest are left confused about what's going on. Suddenly, the whole place starts shaking. She notices the movement. It feels abrupt, but it's clear something's up. A moment later, everyone bursts out looking terrified. They line up, and Xiang Maiyang points out that now they seem pumped. He announces that from now on, everyone will start physical training at 5 a.m. He calls them all useless senior brothers. The sun starts to rise. Lan Em wakes up in his room, wondering why none of the disciples came to greet him. This can only mean everyone is still asleep. It's probably because of the new disciple. They must have been goofing off all night. He steps out of his room, thinking he needs to teach everyone a lesson. He expected Yeon Zhang to keep things in line, but apparently not. That's when he starts to feel confused. Everyone is worn out, sprawled on the ground. He wonders why all these kids look like old men. He immediately yells, asking what happened and what this mess is about. The group exchanges glances, and one realizes they're hesitating to answer him. Who scared them so much that they can't even respond? The scariest part is that Jojil is also lying there, completely drained. But right in front of him is the new guy. Xiao Mong is there squatting with two huge rocks. He breathes out and lifts them again. He's already done 10,065 reps. That's when our boy, also exhausted, spots Yunam. He greets him with a good morning. Yunam watches, confused about what's going on. He can see the boy is about to collapse, but somehow he's still standing. He quickly tells someone to get water, but Chang Myang insists he's fine. He takes a sip, and then Yunam tells him to be honest about what happened. The protagonist says it was nothing serious. They just woke up a bit earlier to train, and strangely, everyone was so motivated, they decided to stick around longer. Lan An thinks it's weird that these lazy disciples are so eager to train. But when he looks back, he sees they're scared, and he quickly realizes Chiang Mai-ang is the reason. How can they call themselves disciples of the Manhua sect when a kid like him can beat them? He should teach him a lesson. He then tells our boy that the White Blossom Hall has its own rules and asks who gave them the okay to sleep less and wake up early to train. Chiang Mai-ang looks confused and says if that's the case, they'll just stop training. Yoon Ems is puzzled by his response. He needed to point out that this kid had threatened his seniors. He stares at our boy who looks so innocent. He's not sure how to deal with this, because it would make everyone in the Mount Fuwa sect look foolish. He has to let everyone know that this kid, who just showed up yesterday, took down all the third-class disciples, making the teachers look like total fools. Not knowing what to say, Chang Ma-yang asks for a month. That's all he needs to train with everyone. He promises they'll see a huge difference in that time. Plus, he's only suggesting this because the seniors seemed unusually motivated. They've been training hard and no one's complained. He shouts if everyone's on board and they all just agree. In that moment, 1M realizes the boy somehow made sure no one would spill the truth. But where did they find a kid like this? He's already taken charge of all the third-class disciples and is even getting them to train. Han then mentions that training must be tough for him, so why is he so keen to wake up early and train? Chiang Mai-yang replies that while they can learn a lot, they can still push themselves harder to improve quicker. Every minute spent sleeping is a minute less spent training. With that, Anum gets that the boy thinks no one needs a reason to train harder. He then asks what's the most important part of the relationship with older brothers. Our boy says it's respect, of course, and promises he'll always follow the senior brother's orders. The leader starts to see that the boy is clever, and he doesn't want to embarrass him to keep the hierarchy intact. Sadly, he admits the boy is sharp. He then turns around, shouting to everyone how impressive it is that they volunteered to train so early. He's really impressed with everyone. If they keep training like this, he's sure they'll get stronger than ever. But that's not what the group wanted, and they asked for help. But Lunam takes off right away, leaving them behind. Jiang Maiyang clenches his fist and asks what kind of help they need. How could they even say that when it was clear he wasn't there to hurt anyone? He then asks if they can talk inside. In the next scene, they're already getting beaten up. Several days go by in this sect. Our protagonist keeps practicing. His energy center is still weak and small, but it's finally starting to take shape. During this time, he's also learning more about what happened to Mount Hoa. The reason the Dornavori system was created was that they didn't have enough trainers anymore. Plus, the sect leader and the two masters were really nice people. They had good intentions, but they were super weak. Their strength was laughable compared to even a disciple from the sect 100 years ago. Naturally, this meant the third-class disciples were pretty terrible too. But the big question is, why does that even matter? After all, Chiang Mai-yang is here now. Jianghua will rise again as the top sect in this land. That's his ultimate goal. The scene changes to the dining hall. A boy tries to grab some food, but his hand hurts so much that he drops it. He mentions that training hard is great, but they need energy to eat. He tells Jewel to talk to the boy and ask him to ease up on the training. No one has been able to use chopsticks for days, but Jewel just says he doesn't have time for complaints and asks if he's their messenger. He adds that anyone wanting to challenge Chiang Myung should talk to him directly. He stands up, saying he wants to chat with Yeonjong for a moment. Outside, Yeonjong comments that he seems relieved. Jewel just asks what he thinks about Mount Hoa. Yeonjong looks a bit puzzled and says that's a tough question. Jewel mentions he could go back to his family anytime, but he knows Yeonjong wants to stay in the sect. Yeonjong agrees and they both go quiet. Jewel then shares that he used to think the Mount Ho sect had no future. His friend says that's a wild thing to say and shouldn't be repeated. However, Jewel admits his perspective has changed. Since Shang Mayan arrived, his view of the sect's future has changed. Even though it was forced, he finally sees the value of those early morning training sessions. He realized he had never pushed himself so hard before. Meanwhile, that kid kept training harder and longer without getting tired. Watching him so committed inspired Jewel to do his best here too. He then declares that starting today, he's giving 100% to become a true martial artist. Yeonjong smiles and says he feels the same way. Meanwhile, our boy is up in a tree, eavesdropping, and thinking he's already got 2 of them. Their trainer hasn't caused much trouble, but the journey is still long. Suddenly, someone bangs on the sect's door, demanding the leader come out. Ching Mian is confused as someone shouts to open the door right away. Then, someone kicks the door and tells a disciple to get the leader. Before anyone can react, they start storming into the sect. Yunaim and Jun look a bit embarrassed as the men invade. From above, Chang Mayang is puzzled, wondering who these people are. The group claims they've been waiting for a long time and are losing patience. They want to know when they'll finally get paid back. At that moment, our boy realizes he has another issue to deal with. He didn't know these guys were so deep in debt. He stands in front of the leader's house and asks if he isn't ashamed, demanding he come out right now. The door opens and the leader steps outside. Shang Myung watches from the side, taking it all in. The elder greets everyone and asks what brings them there so late. Our boy finds it interesting and quickly sees why this man is the new leader. Every move and word he used had a certain wisdom to it. He was subtly trying to stall the conversation with these men. Then the pavilion leader, Mun Yong-gong, clears his throat and says it seems the sect leader is doing quite well. The elder replies that he never expected the great owner of the pavilion would come all the way here. He says it's a shame they have to meet like this. He regrets having to climb Mount Hua but hopes they understand why he came. He mentions that the sect leader should know what's going on, since the deadline they agreed on has come and gone. They've been patient with Mount Hua for ages without asking for anything in return. True to their word, they've been as lenient as possible, which is why they're giving them just 7 days. If they don't pay back what they owe, they'll take all of Mount Hua's land. Suddenly, someone yells and everyone turns around. The men apologize, saying it was wrong for one of the young apprentices to see this. Later, the group fills our boy in that these guys are from the Huan Prefecture. Chiang Myung is deep in thought while the young boy looks for a way to escape before he gets hurt again. Zhou Juel asks if this prefecture is right below Mount Hua and the boy nods. He then wonders if that means the Mount Hua merchants borrowed money from the people in this prefecture. The boy says he's not sure but has heard about money on Gong. As far as he knows, Gong runs the Huan Pavilion, the biggest tavern in that city. Our boy recognizes the pavilion's name and asks if he's the one in charge there. The 2 boys are shocked and tell him to chill as they see him cracking his neck. That's because he knows the Taiho Pavilion has always been part of the Manhua sect. He grabs the boy by the collar and asks if the pavilion lent money to Mount Hua, and now they're trying to take it back since it hasn't been repaid. The boy just nods, but to Chang Mayan, this doesn't add up. It's ridiculous that Mount Hua would borrow money from a place that belongs to them. Clearly, something went wrong in the past. He then calls for Zhou Jiao, who looks surprised. He tells him to bring that thing he mentioned earlier. He wants it right now. Zhou Jiao looks confused, but Chiang Myung insists he bring it immediately. Zhou Jiao runs off saying he'll get it. He brings back the robe and asks why he needs it. Our boy then says there's a Buddhist saying, "Sometimes to meet Buddha, you have to kill him," meaning you might need to stray from the virtuous path to find true enlightenment. Now wearing the robe, he says he's ready to follow that teaching. The 2 boys are stunned and ask if he's really thinking about leaving the sect. In a flash, he's already jumping over the wall. He looks down at the city where some men in the pavilion are laughing, saying, It seems the leader is at a loss for words. They're enjoying themselves, claiming they've finally delivered their last ultimatum. Nari Godo says they deserve it, especially since they've already taken over 100,000 coins from him. They tell Gong that the leader couldn't even respond properly. Gong, smiling, says that even though he's a money-loving merchant, it still pains him to destroy a place that meant so much to his ancestors. The man in the blue robe tells him not to worry, since the final deadline has already been extended for quite a while. He's sure the whole city will appreciate how generous he's been. Gong thinks to himself that it must be nice to live with such a simple mindset. Little did they know, Manhua still held significant influence. That's because the sect's power wasn't just in its martial arts, but in the legacy it built over the years. It's hard to find anyone in the Shanxi region who doesn't know the sect's history. However, little by little, he's been gathering enough strength to finally take them down. Like a duck slowly being cooked, the time had come to finish them off. One of the men then asks what Gong plans to do with Manhua's location since it would be easy to sell. The man's name is Zhang Zhenyu, and he suggests it might be smarter to ask for something else as payment. But Gong insists that the place is worth much more than they realize. Even though it was just an old place, it still held a lot of value. The guys don't seem to get it, and Gong starts to get frustrated. He puts his chopsticks down and says he didn't mean to spill the beans so soon. He tells them to imagine they were enemies of Manhua. How much would they pay to wipe out that sect's legacy? No need to worry, they'd definitely make a big profit from this deal. One guy stands up and calls it a genius plan, suggesting they should celebrate Gong. Later, Jongson's on his way home, saying it was an amazing night. He's about to cash in big from Manhua's downfall, and he trusts Gong completely. He looks up, trying to find the moon, and wonders why it's missing. Meanwhile, Chang Maoyang is just watching. Then Zhongzhen stops, seemingly spotting something ahead. As he focuses, he sees our boy standing there, telling him to keep quiet. Jun finds it odd that such a small, skinny thief is in front of him. What puzzles him more is why the kid is so obvious about it, like he wants everyone to know he's a thief. Jiang Zhen crosses his arms and figures the kid must be planning to rob him. But Chiang Mian calmly says he's not after money, just some answers. Zhang Sun says he usually helps lost kids, but tonight the boy is out of luck. That's because he'll have to deal with his friends, as he knows how dangerous it is to roam around at night. Our boy instantly recognizes the men as caravan guards. One of them asks if they should take the kid out, but Jongson says that's not needed since he just wants to ask a few questions. He turns around, hearing a scuffle, and says it sounds like things are going well. But oddly, there are a lot of fighting sounds, and he starts to wonder what's happening. Then he hears a loud bang behind him. He turns and tells the men to go easy on the kid, but someone says sorry. It's Chang Myang, who has already taken everyone out. Chang Myang says he only wanted to chat, but people were being rude. He then tells Zhang Xin to come over. Once again, he tells him that if he answers, he won't get hurt, and Zhang Xin quickly agrees. Jiang Maiyang grabs him by the collar and says they can start the lesson now. He'd offered not to beat him up, but since Zhang Xin refused, he's going to take a few hits. But no worries, he'll still be able to talk afterward. A moment later, the poor guy is all bruised up, mumbling nonsense. Chang Maiyang warns him that if he doesn't speak right, he'll get hit again. He then asks what's up with Mount Hu borrowing 100,000 coins, and the guy just confirms it's true. Our boy thinks for a second and catches Zhang Sun's attention. He knows that if Zhang Sun sold everything he had, he couldn't gather 10,000 coins, let alone 100,000. So how did he and this group of merchants from this failing city manage to lend 100,000 coins to Mount Hua? Zhang Sun explains how interest works. Basically, even with a small debt, they created a huge snowball effect. Our boy punches him in the head, telling him not to brag about that. He then asks if Zhang Sun owns the linen shop, and the guy says yes. Zhang Maiyang wants to know when he bought the shop, and Jiang San looks puzzled. He explains that the linen shop has been in his family for generations. But again, that doesn't make sense because the linen shop also belongs to the Mount Hua sect. The truth is, every major business in the Huaying prefecture is owned by the sect. The city only thrived because of Mount Hua right above it. The sect let the merchants handle things, but it turns out these guys were stealing from them. Suddenly, someone calls him a coward. A guy shows up calling him a shameless thief and demands to know who he is. Our boy is confused by the sneak attack talk since he's been right in front of everyone. He lets go of Zhang Xin and asks why the guy cares so much about his identity. The man insists he needs to know the name of anyone before he takes him down. Chiang Maiyang just points out that the guy just got knocked out. The man starts getting mad at this kid. He pulls out his sword and charges at him, telling him to brace himself. Chiang Mai-young just watches calmly. He's way faster and stronger than the man, but that doesn't mean the guy is weak. Strength and speed aren't the only ways to measure power. Chiang Mai-young catches the sword in his hand and deflects the blow with his shoulder. The man is totally baffled as Chiang Mai-young recalls a lifetime of memories with the blossoming blade. If he lacks physical strength in a kid's body, he just uses the opponent's strength against them. He then redirects the force, sending the man flying. In that moment, Chiang Mai-young extends his arm and draws his sword. Petals swirl around him as he tells the man he still has a lot to learn. He appears behind the guy using the double blossom sword technique. The poor guy collapses, knocked out. But then he hears someone gasping, realizing he messed up. He had forgotten about Jongsun, who clearly saw him use that technique. And worse, with that shocked look on his face, he might have recognized it. Jongsun mentions those refined moves, this martial skill, and that incredible tie, and he's sure of something. Startled, our boy thinks it can't be that Jongsun figured it out, and then Jongsun asks if he's part of the Jongnan sect. Chiang Mai-young is quiet for a moment, confused, but then admits it's true. He's a member of the great Jongnan sect. Jongsun then says he'll share everything he wants to know, and our boy just thanks him. Back at the sect, Jongmu and Yeonjong are pacing, worried about why Chong Myung hasn't come back. Jongmu thinks it was crazy to let him go out alone, but he believes the boy will return unless something bad happens. Just then, the door opens, and Cheong Myung asks if anything happened while he was gone. Jong, however, says they should be asking him what happened that made him disappear. He simply replies it was nothing serious and that he even made a little extra cash. At that moment, he remembers Jongsun asking if he was from the Zhongmen sect. Even though it was good that his identity wasn't revealed, it still shocked him a bit. Even Manhua's signature technique, the blossoming technique, was mistaken for another sect's move. Jewel then asks what he was doing out there. Our boy just says kids don't need to know. They get mad, pointing out he's a kid too. Chiang Mai-young tells them to gather everyone because it's time to train. Jill is confused, especially since it's nighttime. But our boy tells him to pay attention, saying that whether it rains, shines, or snows, they won't skip a single day of training. Jewel gets excited, saying he can't wait for today's training. He mentions he'll round everyone up and asks if Chiang Mai-young will join. But Chiang Mai-young says he can't today because he has other stuff to do. Zhang replies that they can only train right when he's there. They could try training on their own, but they know no one would take it seriously without him. The protagonist just says he already gets that and tells them to go gather everyone. Then he flops onto his bed thinking about what to do next. Things are tricky since the city merchants are trying to take over, and the papers proving Manhua owns the businesses were probably lost ages ago during the sect's attack. He could just storm the city and fight everyone. But that would just hurt Manhua's reputation, so that's not a solution. He needs proof that they are the rightful owners of this land. The tough part is figuring out how to find that proof. He remembers seeing Jay filling out records of property ownership, but when he opens the door, Jacemin seems to be working on only a few. It's odd that there are so few records, and he's sure Jaemin must be hiding more somewhere else. There's no way everything Manhua owns could fit on just a few sheets, so there's probably a vault that only a leader can access. He recalls hearing that such a vault exists, likely near the leader's house. That spot hasn't changed at all over time, but since everyone there is a martial artist, it has to be close to the leader's place. Still, it's hard to find, and the only way to locate it is through an underground base. Looks like he's about to go on a treasure hunt. He opens the door and jumps out of his room, apologizing to Jangmin for what he's about to do. He promises he won't touch any of the treasure and will take it straight to the leader, though he wonders if he can really keep that promise. The scene shifts to a flash of light in the mountains. Our boy is lying on the ground, saying he's wiped out. He underestimated how massive the mountain is, searching everywhere, especially using that technique. He focuses energy into his palms and slams it into the ground. With that, he can feel the soil pushing back against his energy. He doesn't know exactly where the vault is, but he's sure it's close by. But as time goes on, he gets more tired without finding anything. Still, he keeps trying, until suddenly he senses something unusual. He sends out another energy burst and grabs the pickaxe, declaring that he's found it. Now he just needs to dig and uncover this treasure. After a while, he finally hits a concrete ceiling, but he finds it hard to believe the treasure is hidden behind something so easy to break. He pulls out one of the blocks and discovers it's actually a corridor. This leads to the real vault, but then he hears footsteps. The sect leader is coming. Chong Mayang watches quietly and realizes the leader already knows where the vault is. The leader stands in front of the door, and Chong Mayang thinks this must be the entrance to the vault. But he only sees the leader's hand shaking in front of the door. As he watches the leader hesitate, Chong Mayang finally gets what's going on. The leader isn't revealing how to open the door. In truth, this is the image of a man who feels powerless. Anhu is on the verge of collapse, and its martial strength is fading. Running a place with no resources must be tough, even for a leader like him. Every day, he had to watch the place he devoted his life to slowly crumble. It must have been tough for him to see that. But as a leader, he couldn't let others see him down, so he had to act tough for his disciples. That's why this was the only spot he could show a bit of sadness. After a while, the sun finally comes up. Chong Mayang jumps into the tunnel, admitting that part of this is still on him, but it's not too late. First, he needs to get past this damn door. He steps up, puts his hand on it, and tries to push energy through. But it just bounces right back. He realizes the door is made of millennium metal and knows he can't just smash through it. Now he gets why the sect leader was stuck there, unable to open it. The issue is, he can't cut through this metal either. Then he remembers that Jaemin's tray level wasn't enough for this either. If a leader can get in, there must be another way to unlock it. Something catches his eye, and he starts looking closely at the door's pattern. It's actually sword marks from the 24 blossoming blade technique. He realizes that several techniques from Manhua are mixed in, but he knows it can only be done with the Violet Dawn Kai. He'll need to pull off several moves in a row with perfect precision. That's how the door opens. But why was it made like this? He gets how it works, but now there's another problem. How can he use all these techniques? In his past life, it wouldn't have been a problem. Now, he's just a weak kid. Even though he knows every attack form, he doesn't have enough strength or stamina to pull off each cut. He starts fixing his hair, saying he didn't want to do this. He pats his stomach, realizing he's going to need to take a month-long break. He'll need to tap into just a bit of this. He starts to channel his true natural Kai. This is the energy everyone is born with to keep living. Using this energy feels like using up some of his lifespan, but he has no choice. Suddenly, a purple aura surrounds him. He points his sword, knowing he only has one shot. With just one chance, he has to open this door. The catch is, many of these techniques he hasn't even tried with his body, but he can't wait since the sky is already closing in. He sends out the first cut, coughs up blood, and feels his body getting heavier, realizing he's reaching his limits. But now he can't stop. He uses the first form of the 6 elements, executes the 24 blossoming blade techniques, and says he can't break the chain. He keeps linking one move to the next, and slowly stars start to appear on the door. Finally, he collapses as the whole door lights up. He gets up, asking if it worked. If this doesn't succeed, he's out of options. But suddenly he hears a sound. A gust of wind blows and the door starts to open. Meanwhile, Por's just on the floor, coughing up blood. Because of this, he'll need to take it easy for a few months. But he knows he has to do this to save the Manhua sect. As the door opens, he smiles, eager to see what Jay had kept hidden. Once inside, he spots 3 shelves. It feels odd that there are just books and nothing else. But given they used Millennium Acid, it makes sense why the space is so limited. He recalls Jae-min always stressing about money, so now he's curious where it all went. He opens the first book and is blown away because it holds everything the sect possesses. These are perfect copies of all the official documents. Those merchants are definitely in trouble. But as he looks around, he finds it odd that this whole place only has financial books. He was hoping to find some cash for good food and drinks. Since there's none of that, he grabs another book, thinking he'll check it out before leaving. He discovers these are technique tomes and wonders if the people never learned them. But then he realizes none of these techniques are taught at Mount Hoa. That's because they were sealed away here, inaccessible to anyone. He imagines Jaemon hesitated to pass these techniques to future generations, which is why he hid them. Jaemon was usually a guy full of inner conflict. The first shelf showed his duties in the sect, while the second reflected his love and care for everyone. But now, Jaemon doesn't need to stress because Cheong Ma Young will bring the sect back to its former glory. After that, they'll move ahead and go beyond what they used to be. But then he notices something unusual. On the shelf next to him, there's just a strange scroll sitting there. He takes it down and starts reading. It says this was meant only for the sect leader. If someone's reading this scroll, it means the next leader has already been picked. Sometimes a few lines can say more than endless words, and that's why he decided to leave his thoughts in this book. Even though the sect leader has the title, they don't shape Manhua's future. The new leader must realize that the younger generation within the sect decides its fate. The leader's role is to support the new members, so they can find a new path for the sect. He urges the leader to let go of the heavy idea that the future rests on their shoulders. Manhua will always be Manhua. It's a force and spirit that can't be controlled, and whether the future is bright or dark, it will remain the same place. But one thing that won't change over the years is that they'll always need to guide the disciples and fulfill their roles. That's the heavy weight he's leaving for the next leader of Manhua. John Yan puts the scrolls away, thinking the old man was always like this. However, he's frustrated because there should be way more in this place. He starts to leave, thinking at least the scriptures would help with the merchants, but then he pauses. The layout feels a bit off to him. John Yan had this quirk where even the lamps had to be unevenly spaced from him. So why was that shelf so oddly empty? He leans on it and lifts it up, thinking there's more to this. He pushes it aside, and that's when the glow appears. There's a hole he knew held another secret, and as he goes down, he finally finds what he's been looking for. Heaps of gold bars, precious weapons on the walls, mysterious gems, and tons of techniques. He's drooling, saying he's finally rich. Back at his place, the new leader lets out a sigh, realizing another day has started. Warning should bring hope, but all he feels is fear and resentment. Only 5 days remain until the deadline set by the pavilion owner. Suddenly, someone calls out to him from the door. The leader rushes over, asking what's up. Yoon-jum replies that he can't explain it right now. It's something he needs to see for himself. The leader is taken aback and figures it must be serious if Yoon-jum is so worked up. They both dash through the forest. On their way, he spots a bunch of disciples collapsed in his area and asks what happened. Yoon-jum simply says they were doing some new training on their own. The scene shifts to our boy sitting under a tree. They call out for Chang Mian, asking where he's been. Just then, he shows up, saying he's right there. The leader is shocked and asks why he looks so exhausted. Our boy brushes it off as unimportant and tells him to check something out. The elder wonders what's so urgent, and as our boy smiles, he's blinded by a bright light. The property records the gold bars and the weapons. Chiang Maiyang mentions he stumbled upon them by chance. The leader is curious how that's possible, but Chiang Maiyang says he's too worn out and needs some sleep. The elder lets him go, thinking he can ask later, still in disbelief about the piles of gold bars in front of him. Even more valuable than that are the items in the box, the property records for Manhua and the Huan Prefecture. He hesitantly touches the documents, worried he might tear something and ruin it all. But when he opens them, he feels a wave of relief, realizing these aren't city records, and he collapses to the floor. He then wakes up in bed, saying he also saw the record of the 7 blossoming blades, realizing he was dreaming like crazy. Then he yells, asking where the chest came from, and someone confirms it. We see another person looking at the same records. It's Yang Yang, the head of Mount Hui's finances. He confirms that all those records are legit. Plus, there were authenticity certificates under that treasure, and all the certificates were issued by the government, making it easy to verify. They could use those to reclaim the pavilion whenever they wanted. Plus, the treasure itself is worth over 100,000 coins. The leader feels relieved, saying they've finally caught a break. Or maybe he just doesn't grasp how that strange kid brought so much luck to this place. It's like the spirit of good fortune is roaming around Mount Hua. But he stands up, saying if these records are real, they need to have a serious talk. He tells them to summon the property owners listed in the book to Mount Hua right away. A few days later, Isgong is climbing the mountain, with everyone urging him to slow down. But he insists they keep moving, because this will be the last time they have to climb that awful mountain. Jiang's grumbles, saying he never wants to go back there and doesn't even want to look at Mount Hua again. The other merchants wonder if the leader called them because he managed to get the money, but Gong at the front says gathering 100,000 coins isn't easy. He's sure the leader will ask for more time since he hasn't raised the funds. It was impossible to meet the deadline they were given, which is why they were summoned. Some call the leader shameless for gathering everyone when he's the one in debt. But others say that even though the sect is struggling, the name of Great Mount Hua still commands respect. Zhang Zun wonders if they really can't pay, especially since a disciple from the Zhongnan sect seemed keen on Mount Hua. If he could snag 5,000 gold coins, he'd never have to work again. But as the merchants gather in front of the sect, they all share a weird feeling of unease. It feels unsettling to think about cutting off Mount Hua's future, a sect that's protected the Hawaiian prefecture for ages. But they know this, and together, they head in to deal with the inflated debt. Hanan greets them and says the leader is ready to meet them, inviting them to follow. The leader shows up, facing all the merchants. Gong bows and says it's nice to see the leader again. The leader thanks them for making the tough journey to get there. Gong, ever the phony, says while they're busy merchants, it must be even tougher for the leader. The leader laughs and asks if they're tired from the climb, offering them some tea. But Gong cuts in, saying they're just simple merchants and want to talk business first. The leader apologizes for not considering their time and explains he called them to update them on Mounthua's situation. Even after sending countless requests for help, no one was willing to help the sect. It's unfortunate, but despite their efforts, they can't pay the debt on time. Gong stands up and says they've already given Manhua enough time. They have families to support and can't keep pushing the deadline. The sect leader says that's exactly why he wanted to talk to everyone. They can't pay the full amount right now, but they can at least make a partial payment. He wants to know which merchants would be willing to extend their repayment into the future. He then bows and asks them to show some mercy to Manhua. The merchants start whispering among themselves as some surprising things begin to happen. Our guy is watching from a distance, commenting that it's an interesting way to handle things. He's just not sure if the leader's words are meant to pressure the merchants, or if it's a last-ditch plea before an attack. However, it's clear that sect leader Hyunjong isn't as straightforward as he seems. A sect leader needs to be tough and calculating. Even though they're all from Manhua, it's still a martial sect, and the leader has to know how to play the game. Chang Mayang wants to see if Hyunjong really has the coldness needed for a sect leader. Gong smiles and says he already told him they can't push the deadline any further, but Hyunjong asks him not to take it the wrong way, as he wasn't just talking to Gong. He knows Manhua owes more than 100,000 coins, but each merchant has their own share, and he wants to know who is willing to extend their part for future repayment. Gong thinks this leader is desperate. He then asks if the others say they can't wait any longer, will he be able to pay them all? The leader replies that Manhua's reputation has taken a hit, but they've still managed to get some help, and have part of the amount. Of course, they don't have the full 100,000 coins to pay everything, which is why he asked them to show mercy to Manhua and let them pay off the debt gradually. Gong is about to say this isn't acceptable, but Jongsong interrupts, asking if they'll get any rewards for extending the final deadline. The leader confirms that's the case. Everyone starts murmuring, debating whether to extend the deadline. The problem is they know it means risking never getting their money back. Jongsu then asks why they should do this. The leader takes a deep breath, looks at him, and asks if the name of Manhua and its history aren't enough to guarantee something. But Gong chuckles and then laughs out loud, telling the sect leader he's asking too much from everyone. The leader stays quiet and asks if Gong really thinks what he's asking for is too much. If that's the case, he'd like to ask something from everyone. He wants to know what Manhua means to each of them, if the name and history of that place don't deserve at least some thought. Huther didn't really respect the sect's name, and who would ignore all the history they had? The sect might have lost some strength, but it always stood by the Huan prefecture. They shared the spirit and power of Manhua with everyone in the city. He wanted to know what Manhua meant to each of them, and asked them to think about their answers. Gong paused for a moment and then said he had an idea. He pointed to the side and told those who wanted to extend the deadline to stand over there. But if anyone wants to collect their money today, they should come stand with him. He then turned and warned them that each person is responsible for their choices, and those who choose to extend the deadline won't be seen as merchants anymore. He advised them to think smart and make their choice quickly. The merchants started to think, but no one moved. The place went silent, and Gong began to laugh. He asked the leader if he noticed that, sadly, no one felt sorry for that place. But then someone walked over to the other side. It was Jiang Xin, and Gong asked where he was headed. The leader just watched. The other merchants were curious about what this meant. Jiangxin told them to stop looking at him like that, admitting he knew he was making a dumb choice. He told Gong he wouldn't understand because he wasn't from Huayan Prefecture. Gong came here to take over businesses from others, so he didn't get what Manhua meant. Everyone born in Huayan grows up hearing tales about it. They dream of joining the sect and becoming sword masters. And even if they realize they lack talent and give up on that dream, they still learn how Manhua has protected Shanxi province. Gong didn't get it, but Jiangxin said Gong wouldn't understand anyway. It was something he learned from his dad, who learned it from his granddad. Manhua has always been a source of pride for Huayan and Shanxi. For Gong, it would be easy to take the money and leave Huayan for Hamzu to spend it elsewhere. But Jiangxin wasn't going anywhere, even if he had the cash, because he had spent his whole life in Huayan. Gong couldn't believe Jiangxin would give up making money for life over something like that, warning him he'd regret it. Jongsun remembered that while heading up Mount Hua, he thought about how nice it would be to retire rich, and now he was ready to give that up when he was so close. It felt like a big mistake, but he had his reasons. He said he had already made enough to keep living. If he doesn't get any more money in the future, he'll see it as a small regret for not taking this chance. But he would always regret watching Mount Hu fall today because of a choice he made. Even if he earned enough for a lifetime, that kind of life wasn't what he wanted. Gong just laughed and told him to do what he wanted since he was apparently the only one choosing not to get paid. But then someone asked, who said it was just one person? More merchants started walking over to stand by Zhang. Gong couldn't believe it, while Hyun Zhang watched everything happen. He lowered his head, feeling satisfied to see so many people still had a real connection to that place. He then told Vimum to bring it over. At that moment, Onum set a box on the ground with all the records. From a distance, Gong could already tell they were the property records of the prefecture. The leader said that Mount Hua had always shown kindness to their ancestors for generations, but some here chose to betray them instead of repaying those debts. According to the property records, Mount Hua would take control of all those businesses and all the wealth they had built up down to the last coin. At that moment, the merchants who chose to stay on the other side were all scared, asking what he meant. Why was the leader taking everyone's business like that? But Hyunjong just says it's exactly what he meant. Suddenly, Gong bursts out laughing, claims this joke has gone way too far. The leader then tells Gong it's embarrassing for him to think this is all a joke. Gong shuts the book and says he gets it. He wants to know how they'll prove those accounting books are legit. The leader then asks if Gong is suggesting they faked those records. Gong says he never thought Mount Hua would pull something like this. Still, they need to make sure they aren't being played. The leader stays quiet and says he gets what Gong is saying. He orders the finance head of the agency to be brought in. Hyunjong shows up, agreeing that the authenticity of those books is definitely worth looking into. The merchant cheers, saying if the finance guy from their sect agrees, Gong must be right. But then Hyunjong turns and says there's a reason for that. They expected this might happen, which is why half of those books were sent to the prefecture 2 days ago. In that moment, Gong realizes he's in hot water. While they were on their way to Mount Hua, people were already checking those books. That means most of their businesses are probably gone by now. Plus, 2 days is plenty of time for them to wrap everything up. The books at Mount Hua are just a few, while the other half must have already been verified. Gong is about to lose it and yells at the leader. But Hyunjong tells him to lower his voice, saying he has no right to shout there. Real friendship means helping each other in tough times. But they owe no mercy to those who turned their backs when they needed it most. He tells everyone to head back to Hoa's prefecture, because everything will be sorted out. He warns that if it had been done right, they would have taken everything. But for their efforts, they can only take one cart with a few items. Aang grits his teeth in anger, saying he won't forget this. He turns away while the other merchants just watch. At that moment, Hyunjian speaks to those who stayed loyal to the sect until the end. Nothing changes for their business, except that it now belongs to Mount Hua. They can keep managing it like before and pocket the profits. Plus, he wants to talk about ways for both sides to benefit and invites everyone in. Jongsan knows he's better off than Gong. Still, he went from being a shop owner to just an employee of Mount Hua, and he wonders why his grandfather chose this path. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Chong Huayang, who is furious. He's questioning what kind of deal this is, allowing them to take just one cart of riches. He calls the leader a coward and insists he won't let this happen at Mount Hua. Outside the city, Gong and the other merchants are loading their carts. Everyone is boiling with rage. As soon as they hit the city gate, they were met by government soldiers. If it weren't for the sect leader, they would have lost everything. Now they're mad at Gong for causing all this. They ask him how they're supposed to get out of this mess. They tell him to stop being quiet because everyone trusted his choices. Gong turns around, asking why he's being blamed for this mess. The fool goes quiet for a moment and claims Gong isn't the only one at fault, but then Gong stops. He says there's no need to stress out since they're only stuck here temporarily. He believes those damn documents are fake and were made up by the leader. But one guy in the back argues they look real and have been verified by the prefecture. Gong argues that they must have colluded with the prefecture and its reps to rob him, but he plans to head to Luoyang and speak to the owner there. If this city's people are using the authorities, they'll reach out to someone even higher. Suddenly, someone chimes in, saying he's talking nonsense. It's our guy dressed like a bandit. Gong asks who said that, and the guy coughs, claiming he's the only one around. Gong is puzzled, wondering who this bandit is that moves like an old man. He warns him that he might want the riches in the carts, but he should leave fast, or he'll end up dead for nothing. Our guy hates being underestimated. He insists he's not stealing. He's just taking back what belongs to Manhua. Gong is confused about what wealth he's referring to. Then it hits him that this guy is part of the Dan Sect. Out of nowhere, someone shows up, and Gong thinks it's the perfect moment for revenge. A bunch of mercenaries rush toward Shang Mayang. He glances at them for a moment and charges at them. The first guy gets smacked on the head with a scabbard, another takes a hit to the chin, and another gets it on the forehead. In no time, they're all airborne. He stops in front of Gong and says it's good for him to know. Until now, no one has dared to challenge him and walked away in one piece. Gong is baffled. He didn't realize Manhua still had a martial artist of this caliber. He tells the useless ones to step back. Then he tells our guy that he doesn't know where he came from. But if he had been helping this sect, they wouldn't be in this situation. Too bad he picked the wrong person for revenge, and he warns that our guy will die at his hands as a lesson to that sect. He channels his energy, saying the leader will be very upset to hear that someone like him was taken down by Gong. He charges at him, telling him to get ready. Kyung Mayong finds it odd that a shop owner has this much martial energy. But now it's time for him to get beaten up everywhere, except the mouth, since he needs to talk afterward. The forest erupts, and Gong has his hands on the ground. He's sure he didn't let his guard down and has faced tougher opponents than this guy. There's a saying that a tiger hunts best when chasing a mere rabbit. Plus, when he saw this masked guy take out the mercenaries, he kept his guard up. Yet, this guy still looks bored. He steps forward again, saying he's going to fix that face. He extends both palms and stands face to face with Chong Mai. But our guy just lifts the sword's scabbard and strikes his hand with it. The man watches as his hand starts absorbing all his energy. It runs through his arm, and he screams in pain. He had focused all his power, but it got blocked right as he was about to release it, and now it's all coming back. Our guy tells him he's way too slow and suggests he give up. At this rate, he's going to break all his fingers before he even lands a hit. Gong brushes him off, powers up his foot, and charges at him. But our guy suddenly blurs and the energy flies right past him. It explodes in the background, and Gong has no clue where he ended up. In that split second, our guy is already behind him. Gong spins around for another strike, but the scabbard blocks him again. Once more, his arm takes the hit from the energy backlash. The protagonist warns him again that he's going to break all his fingers before he gets anywhere. Gong crashes to the ground, insisting the kid isn't faster or stronger than him. Looking at their energy and strength, he's confident he could take on 10 of them at once. He gets back up and tries another kick, but our guy dodges it. Gong can't figure out why he can't land a single hit. No matter how slow he is, this guy dodges all his attacks perfectly. He's convinced this guy knows exactly what he's planning. This guy's a weird monster, and Gong still can't gauge how dangerous he really is. Then our guy stands up again and says he won't keep playing around like this. He wanted to have some fun, but now he's running low on energy. Sweating, Mao wonders why someone like him didn't help Manhua. The two stay quiet. Chang Maiyang tosses the sword onto his back and asks why he'd even answer that. To him, people like Gong are living in a fantasy, so he's not interested. But he's curious why Gong has such impressive martial arts for a shop owner. Even weirder is that someone so skilled is living in Mount Hua's prefecture. Gong asks why a martial artist can't also be a shop owner. Our guy says it's no big deal. But he's sure that with skills like that, Gong could be making way more money elsewhere. Gong acts clueless and says that doesn't make sense, but Xiang Maiyang tells him to drop that nonsense. He's not buying that Gong is there on his own without anyone giving orders. But Gong insists that's exactly it. Our guy says they always say that in the end. But now it's time for the final question. He asks Gong if he knows what he does to get information from someone. Confused, Gong asks how he would know. Our guy clenches his fist and says he beats them until they start talking. In that moment, the poor fat man realizes he's about to get beaten. The protagonist then says there's no point in trying to get info from someone who won't talk. That's why they need to take a more effective approach. He charges at him, saying he's going to get the info, or at least enjoy beating him up. At that moment, Gong sees he's going for his left knee. The problem is, at that speed, he can't block it, but suddenly he gets hit in the shoulder. He's confused because all the moves suggested an attack on his knee. He sees another strike coming low and realizes it's aimed right for the top of his head. He raises his arm to defend, but it's really the hilt coming up from below. The poor guy gets hit in the neck and stumbles back, confused about how the blow came from below when he thought it was an overhead strike. Everything about the protagonist looks blurry to him. He keeps getting pummeled, seeing the hits coming but unable to dodge. It's hitting him that if this keeps up, he might actually die. The calm in his opponent's eyes makes it clear he's taken out a lot of people before. Our guy starts to pull out his sword. Stumbling back, Gong thinks to himself that he really doesn't want to die. Just then, Chang Maoyang comes in to slice him right down the middle. Terrified, Gong raises his hand to protect himself. Suddenly, a blue energy spreads through the woods. When the smoke clears, he's left standing there, completely worn out. Someone questions how he knows the Taiga's palm technique. It turns out it's the protagonist who crouched down, asking if Gong happens to be from the Southern Edge sect. He realizes now that everything makes sense. Gong has put Manhua in debt and even knows techniques from the Southern Edge. So he asks if Gong was sent here by them. At that moment, Gong realizes he messed up. It would have been better to die than to let on that he knows this technique, especially in front of someone from Manhua. He really made a big mistake. When that cut came down, he was sure he was done for since the sword was already out. While he's mumbling, Chang Maoyang asks if he's not going to respond, saying it's kind of honorable, showing some loyalty. He knows he can't underestimate the Southern Edge, especially since Manhua has always been their rival. But today, while the Southern Edge is still strong, Manhua is in chaos. It's odd for a sect like that to act so low. This means Gong either doesn't know the whole story or what he knows is just a lie. He mentions that even in the past, when the world was rough, there was still some honor. Now one sect wants to steal Manhua's techniques, while the other wants to take over completely. Gong stays quiet. Then he asks if this wouldn't actually be better for Manhua. He's sure the kid knows there's no future for that place anymore. Now that they've lost their techniques and power, they can't go back to being the powerhouse they once were. It's only a matter of time before they fall apart, and Gong is just speeding up the process. A martial sect without the skills of past generations is doomed. Our guy asks who said that. Responds that everyone should already know. But then he corrects him, asking who said they've lost the techniques of previous generations. He starts to threaten to slice him in half, saying he needs to confirm the info before spreading it around. Chao Ma Yan remembers that Manhua and the Southern Edge sect share many similarities, which is why they're connected. Both use swords as their main weapon. They're located close to each other, and everyone knows about the rivalry between them in this area. That's why they always fought, and he ended up taking on the Southern Edge people. Gong then insists he's not from the Southern Edge, and our guy replies that he's not from Manhua either. They start throwing insults at each other, and Chong Maiyang tells Gong to shut up. He then puts his sword under Gong's chin and says he's got something cool to show him, since Gong revealed the Tai Yi Pong technique. He lifts Gong slowly, suggesting that if he knows what's coming, it'll be quite the experience. But it'd be a real bummer if he can't even grasp it. Either way, he should fill in the person who sent him here. Suddenly, his sword starts moving like a blur. Gong is stunned as a flurry of cuts comes at him. The strikes nearly hit him, but just miss. He has to defend himself, but the wind from the cuts is strong enough to push him back. But nothing is actually hitting him. So what's Xiang Maiyang up to? Xiang Maiyang then mentions that cherry blossoms have the strongest fragrance when they bloom in winter. That season hasn't come yet, but the spirit of Manhua is still alive. He swings his sword, saying that spring is still on its way. Gong lowers his arms and looks up. He sees a whirlwind of petals falling between him and Chang Maiyang, who says the cherry blossoms are about to blanket the whole mountain again. Gong is puzzled, looking up, trying to figure out what he's seeing. It looked like hundreds of petals were heading straight for his forehead. He keeps watching as they slowly drift closer. But the 24 techniques of Manhua, the cherry blossoms storm. At that moment, the poor guy drops to his knees, and our boy puts his sword away. Gong's body slams into the ground, and our boy even coughs up a bit of blood, saying at this rate, he's exhausting himself more than his enemies. What used to be child's play is now wearing him out. He suddenly glances to the side and calls out to one of the merchants. The man, shaking all over, comes over to talk to him, and our boy tells him to hurry up and get closer. He then addresses the four of them, asking who wants to get beaten up before leaving. Everyone stays quiet, not in the mood for that. He then asks who would rather leave without a punch to the face. Everyone raises their hands, saying that would be great. Chang Maiyang was about to mention cooperation. But the guys just take off, thanking him. At that moment, he yells for everyone to freeze. They look back, hesitating, and our boy asks if they really can't think for themselves. How's he supposed to take these carts if everyone runs away? He then shouts, demanding to know how much the stuff in the carts is worth. and the guys start saying there are between 1,800 and 2,300 coins. Another cart has 8,000, and our boy is baffled by all that cash. He tells them to head to the city of Zhenjiang and bring that money back because he's going to sell their own carts back to them. It's best to bring the money without mentioning who it's for, or else he'll take them out right there. The guy is confused about this whole selling their carts back to themselves and asks what happens if the person sent to Zhenjiang doesn't return with the cash. Our boy laughs, asking what they plan to do after they run away. After all, they can't rebuild their businesses without what's in those carts. What's inside is their future, so they better come back with the money if they want to take those things back. One of them raises his hand and asks what if they tell the government about our boy. Our boy just kicks the ground and warns that they can try, but they better never show their faces here again and run off to the other side of the continent. The poor merchants realize there's no way to escape this crazy guy. He then tells them to stop dawdling and hurry up to gather the cash. Later on, he's checking out the cash, saying it's amazing. He rushes back, all pumped up, and jumps into the sect. Meanwhile, Jojiol is squeezing out his sweat-drenched shirt. The group is worn out, questioning if they really have to do this every morning. But he feels like a lot has shifted. Now, they actually seem like a real group of martial artists. At that moment, Yeonjong asks why he's grinning like that. He replies that they finally look like martial artists. He thought it was a weird idea since they always had been. But his friend says he gets it. He's been thinking the same thing. Just a few days ago, he couldn't picture himself training so hard at Manhua. But now it's time to dive back into the second training session of the day. Before, they just passed the time, climbed the mountain, and did some lazy training. But ever since he showed up, a lot has changed. He knew it was all thanks to Chang Mayan. He was definitely shaking things up at Manhua. Right now, it's just a small breeze. But no one knows how big of an impact it'll have later. When he gets to the sect, he hears someone yelling not to put that there and telling the workers to hurry up and bring more. They see a bunch of workers coming in, many carrying stones, urging them to bring everything without breaking anything and to work faster. The third-year students walk in, trying to figure out what's going on. Yunam is bossing everyone around until Yeonjong calls out to him. He walks over and asks what's happening. The master explains that those guys are all workers. They're there to fix up the entire temple. As you can probably guess, the place is in pretty bad shape and really needs repairs. At that moment, the chief asks what they think they're doing, and the boys look confused. He tells them there's a ton of materials to bring in for them to work on, so they better get moving. They're startled and say they're going, but they just finished training. That night, they wonder what just happened. Looking at a chicken, they question if they're dreaming. Everyone is stunned, wondering if that was real food. They start drooling and get hyped to eat. The changes that Cheong Mayang brought to the sect were coming in faster than they thought. That same night, Jojiol and Yeonjong were outside, saying they never expected all this to happen. Still so much construction, new food, even new uniforms. At that moment, Yeonjong stops, and Jojong asks what he's thinking about. He replies that he's just amazed by how powerful money is. He knew they got a lot, but didn't expect the sect to spend it all so quickly. Yeonjong says the struggles they went through were because they had no other choice. Plus, he had never heard Yunnam laugh like that before. Joabjong then asks what they should do next. Yeonjong says that just like Manhua is changing a lot, they also need to change. It's not just about making money. He recalls spotting a bunch of martial arts books in that chest. Just as they were heading out for training, Chang Mayang mentioned an amazing coincidence. He found a chest packed with techniques and bars. Zhou Jial admits his acting was pretty bad. What he can't figure out is how he managed to get all that. Yeonjiang says he's got no clue either. One thing's for sure, big changes are coming here. They're caught up in the storm that's about to hit, and they need to be prepared. Otherwise, they'll get swept away by this wave of change. Zhou Jul reassures him not to stress because he's feeling confident. All he wants to know is where Chiang Myong is, since he's been Mie since morning. His friend says he heard he went to chat with the sect leader. The scene shifts to a chat with a leader who says our guy deserves a reward for finding that treasure, which is why he was called in. Our guy looks a bit puzzled, and the chief asks if there's anything he wants. He mentions that maybe Chang Mayang still wants a cut of the treasure, so if he does, he can keep some. But Chang Mayang says he's not really into riches, leaving the elder confused. Our guy adds that there's not much to buy at Manhua anyway. The old man smiles, saying he knows the path to enlightenment and has let go of his attachment to wealth. In reality, he doesn't want money because he's already got plenty from robbing the merchant. The elder then asks if he wants any martial arts or advanced techniques, and he says he's not interested in those either. Confused, the sect leader asks why he wouldn't want something like that. He simply states that there must be a reason the ancestors set the rule that each technique should be learned. The elder feels a bit awkward, thinking it makes sense. But our guy only said that because he's the one stuck teaching these fools. There are still plenty of techniques he needs to pass on, but he has to do it without raising any eyebrows. He's unsure about what he wants from Manhua, as the name is all that matters to him now. Then he gets an idea and says he wants permission to visit Huiyan's prefecture whenever he feels like it. The Raspal's main goal is to gain more freedom to roam the world. Hyunjong asks why, and he explains that being stuck there is holding back his growth as a martial artist. Maybe if he could get out and explore, he'd improve more. The leader says he gets it, but that would break the sect rules. Given what he's accomplished, it might be deserved, but many might complain it's unfair. He then asks if there's anything else our guy wants. But our guy isn't sure what else he wants besides freedom. Then he mentions he has an idea. He says his body feels like it's in bad shape, and the chief asks what he means by that. Our guy says his internal energy seems to be messed up. The leader nods, but asks why he's bringing that up. Our brave guy then says he wants some life-replenishing pills. The chief looks a bit confused, so he clarifies that he wants the pills that boost a person's life energy. Everyone stares at the chief, and our guy feels hopeful. Haiyan Jian then drinks his water, bangs the table, and says from now on he's allowed to leave Mount Hua. The instructors all agree, leaving our guy confused. They start pushing him out, and he asks why, considering they said it wasn't possible before. However, the old man shoves him out, saying he's not responsible for whatever he does in the prefecture. Our boy is really upset because he wanted those life-restoring pills, but the old man doesn't have any. Haiyan Jaeon shuts the door and asks what the others think of the kid. Man M just says the kid is obviously a real talent, and the elder agrees. Even though he's just a kid, there's a certain wisdom about him. Sure, he might not be all there, but that's normal for his age. Monem thinks that when he talks to the boy, it feels like he's chatting with an adult. He doesn't show the childishness you'd expect. He carries the vibe of a seasoned martial artist, and someone like that is definitely a prodigy. The elder then asks Hyun Sang for his thoughts on the boy. Hyun Sang points out that everyone knows he's not the best judge of character. The leader says he gets that, but still wants to hear his take. He pauses for a moment and says the kid is a child who doesn't act like one. That's how he sees him. Yoon M realizes he's not the only one who feels that way about the boy. Hyun Sang mentions he's met mature kids who had tough upbringings. But those kids were still kids, while Chiang Mayan genuinely seems more like an adult. The master asks if he thinks something's off with the boy, and he replies he doesn't believe so. The leader thinks it over and says he values their opinions, but they shouldn't read too much into it. The kid is still just a child, and that's how they'll treat him. Their main goal is to help everyone reach their potential and fix any issues. The two nod to the leader, saying they understand. He then asks Yoon M how the repairs are coming along. Yoon M explains that since it's tough to bring supplies up the mountain, they're gathering trees from there. The issue is that it'll take time to cut everything down and dry the wood. Jong asks if he has any problem with spending all the money on these minor things, and Yoon M quickly says no. The leader hopes everyone gets that Mount Hua needs to be revived. They'll rebuild the outer appearance and the martial arts too. Lam agrees, saying it's a smart choice. He then tells Sang to get familiar with the new martial arts books as soon as he can so they can be put to use. He also asks him to be super careful since there can't be any mistakes in what the boys will learn. Song just assures him that he guarantees it won't happen. Jong thanks him, saying he trusts both of them. However, Song feels a bit unsure. He wonders if he should tell the leader that those books are too new for something that's meant to be hundreds of years old. Plus, some of them have fresh ink stains, suggesting someone rewrote them. But maybe he's just being paranoid since the content seems harmless. To him, it shows someone is trying to help Mount Hua while staying under the radar. Meanwhile, our boy outside is furious for being kicked out just for asking about the pills, especially after all the effort he put into rewriting those wild techniques. And the look on the leader's face made it clear they don't even know how to make the life pearls anymore. Now things are getting complicated for him. Every fight, he has to deal with the side effects from opening the door, and the situation is getting worse than he thought. His body is taking forever to heal, and at this rate, it'll take at least a year. He knows that staying still for 6 months could be the end for someone his age. Kids are always growing and changing. That's why it's the best time to lay down the groundwork for martial arts and toughen up. The boy's stuck and needs to figure something out. To recover an 8K, you've got two options. You can either take a panacea, which is the life pearl, or get it from someone else using a key transfer technique. The catch is, no one wants to share their energy with him right now. What's odd is that back in the day, those pearls were everywhere. He could find them just lying around. There were so many in the sect that he sometimes used them to cure hangovers. He starts pretending to pour a drink, saying he misses those days. Then he pauses for a moment, thinking about the hangover, and suddenly remembers something. He knows exactly where to find a remedy like that. He bolts through the forest, convinced it's still there. Sometimes being a fool has its perks. A bit later, he's staring up at a massive mountain. This was the tallest and most dangerous peak on Manhua. The worst part? The spot he's looking for is right in the middle of it all. A cave that only he knew about among all the disciples. He used to hide there when he was on the run from the leader, and it really saved him. It was the perfect spot to drink without anyone catching him, which makes him wonder why they didn't kick him out when he was younger. But that's not what matters now. He needs to climb it and grab that panacea. In his past life, he could have reached it in 2 jumps, but that's not happening with his current body. So he heads back to grab a rope. He starts climbing the mountain, thinking going down is easier than going up. Sure, there's a small chance he could fall and die, but he's determined, saying you only live once. Or technically, he's living twice. He ties the rope to a tree, and the climbing mission kicks off. The main reason training is banned here is because of the deadly drop. There's hardly anywhere to step or grab on. Just then, he slips and starts free falling. He's terrified, thinking he's about to die. But when the rope hits its limit, he's yanked back up. At least he's glad he tied a good knot. Now, though, he's swinging toward the mountain. He gathers energy in his hand and slams it into the mountain as he swings back, but he breaks a bone in his arm. Still, he manages to activate the adhesion seal, sticking to the rock. Hagaba's issue now is that one arm is broken, but at least he can see the entrance to the hideout. He could reach it if he lets go of the adhesion seal and uses some momentum. He steps, swings back and forth, and after a few swings, he's ready to jump. But the rope snaps right at that moment. Once again, he has to activate the adhesion seal, but the bones in his hands start to crack. He keeps slipping, hitting the wall, and almost falling out. Barely, he hangs on and manages to pull himself into the cave. He's already swearing, claiming it's a lie that he was the master of the fluorescent blade. As he steps into the cave, he sees everything covered. He moves closer and pulls it off. The kid even left a lamp here that never seems to go out. He opens the chest, and inside, there's another one that he hopes has what he needs, the life-restoring pills. As he starts to open it, energy surges through him. It felt like a ton of cherry trees bloomed in the cave. There were also some white pills, which were way rarer and stronger. He apologizes to the past Jangmin, saying at least he didn't take the most expensive one. His main goal was to regain his strength, and it would be great if he could boost his internal energy too. Without thinking, he pops the first pill in his mouth, and it dissolves. The energy spreads, and he starts to breathe out, trying to stay focused. Slowly, everything trying to spread in his body starts to condense into a single grain. The catch is it needs more purification before it can merge with his energy core. After all, he wants to build the perfect body using only pure energy. That's why he's rejecting any impure energy. The tiny leftover bits combine into the core. The pill bursts, his energy core lights up, and the whole cave turns blue. The pearls began to drop to the ground, and the boy was already soaring in his cultivation. His eyes turned blue, and he was transcending, already shouting. His hands were shaking. After a bit, he finally opened his eyes. His injuries and even his broken bones were healing, and he felt stronger than before. Using a pearl like this in such a young body had a way bigger impact than he thought. Even the toxins were starting to leave his body. The only weird thing was his heart was racing. The excess energy felt like waves crashing inside him. And if it hit the energy core in his head, he could lose everything. He needed to stop this flow, but the energy just wouldn't fade. In a chat with Jangmon, he asked if he was a devotee or a martial artist. Jangmon explained that martial artists seek control and suppression, while devotees let things happen naturally. He asked our boy how he would suppress the laws of the universe. If he tried to block a river, eventually, the water would find another way, which is why Jamin preferred to let things unfold as they should. Humans are part of nature, just like any other animal. So why wouldn't they already have their fate in this universe? With his hand on his chest, he pondered this idea of letting things flow. He found himself in his sea of consciousness, looking up and seeing a huge wall starting to crack. He recognized it as the top of his body's energy. That was the entrance gate, and the cracks showed just how damaged his body was. When he placed his hand on it, he felt a strong vibration on the other side. By the looks of it, it was only a matter of time before the wall gave way. Eventually, it would fall, and if it all opened at once, he would be swept away. Just like Jamin said, you can't block a river because it finds a new route. If he tried to stop this wave, he would be defeated, so he had to let it flow somehow. He then opened a small hole in the wall. The water began to flow under his feet, and he realized Jamun had always been right. After a century, he finally got that everyone has their place in nature. The energy surged to the center of his head, and soon enough, morning broke. He woke up in the cave, and the boy who had been floating just dropped to the ground like a fool. He was baffled, trying to figure out how he had been flying. But when he glanced at his palm, the memories came rushing back. All the energy channels in his body had opened up, and somehow this kid had made it through. It was all thanks to Brother Jangmin's teachings. The risk was huge, but so was the payoff. Not only did he get his natural energy back, but he also boosted his reserves. Basically, his potential had expanded. As he stepped out of the cave, he realized the things he once found boring now meant the world to him. In his past life, he was just a swordsman, not a true follower. But Mount Hula is both a martial arts school and a spiritual place. That's the real deal here, but he only grasped part of it before. This made him wonder if he could actually restore something like that. But no matter what, he just had to give it his all. He didn't need the pills in the box anymore, but the others in the sect could really use them. It was finally time to head back, but not before grabbing the booze he left behind. Manhua had changed a lot, but that spot still felt the same, making him nostalgic. It was like he was finally part of it all again. Eventually, he would go back to that cave, but for now, it was time to return to Manhua. He jumped across the mountains, even pausing to take in the sunset in style. At Lesna's body felt super light. He took a moment to enjoy the mountain air, but it smelled awful. The purification had turned him into a walking chemical disaster. Meanwhile, at the sect, everyone was freezing and shivering in the cold. It was early, and they were getting ready for training, wondering how long they'd have to endure this. Someone mentioned that Chang Mayang had been acting weird lately. He looked drained, like he was sick and worn out. Then someone suggested that maybe the rumors were true, that he had gone through an energy surge. Everyone noticed how tired he looked and agreed. Maybe he was skipping training because he couldn't handle it anymore. The group figured that meant they didn't have to push themselves so hard either. One brave soul finally asked why they had been following his lead all this time. It was just because he could take them all on alone before. But now that he was worn out, things had shifted. If they teamed up, they could finally take down the boy. Jojiol, standing off to the side, was just watching the chatter, while Yeonjeong told them to let them be. Soon enough, reality would hit them. The gate started to open. Someone approached, glowing, and the group was already scared stiff. It's our boy, radiating Nomura. They couldn't believe this guy, who was almost dead, showed up with skin shining brighter than ever. Chiang Mayang realizes why everyone's upset with him. He's been slacking on training lately because of his health, and he genuinely apologizes for it. The guys instantly sense revenge is on the way and tell him not to stress, that everything's cool, and he doesn't need to come back, but he calls them out, saying he knows they've been working hard even when he wasn't there. He knows the frustration is on him for being a lousy instructor. That's why he's determined to make up for the lost time. And nothing beats some serious training for that. He gestures toward the mountain and tells everyone to run. They look confused, not sure what he means. Kyung Mayang simply says it's a race, and the last one will have to run twice. One of them was about to complain about climbing to Lotus Flower Peak, but Yeonjong had already taken off running. Jojul followed, telling him to wait. The rest just stood there, watching them leave. Then, one guy said at this rate he'd be last and started walking. Suddenly, everyone freaked out and took off running. Our boy comments on their boldness and thinking about mutiny. But having the drive to change things is a good thing. Those who just follow orders will eventually hit a wall. But complaining about the effort is the worst. A martial artist earns their voice through training and skill, and that's what he's here to ensure. Over the centuries of martial arts, many have become the strongest, but no one person can carry a sect alone. For his sect to be strong, all the disciples need to be strong too. His aim is to make sure Mount Hua shines brighter than the old one. Then he shouts that the last one today won't get dinner. The sun is finally rising between the mountains, and the poor disciples are already on the ground, worn out as usual. Jojiel, feeling exhausted, looks back and sees Yeonjong getting up. He's impressed by how hard this guy is trying. It's clear why he's the senior brother. This isn't just about strength or skill anymore. It's all about willpower. A stone drops and someone asks why the sun is already up. It's Chongmong with a bunch of weights, saying anyone who's done with their training should hand over the weights because he wants to use them. He looks around and wonders why everyone is still sleeping. While he grumbles that training just started, Jojul stares at him, thinking he's a monster. He says these kids today can't be taken seriously, even though he's the youngest there. He then drops the weights and says that's it for today, but warns that anyone who skips training tomorrow will have to train 10 times harder afterward. Before leaving, he tells them to clean up and put everything away. The others think he's a jerk. Later at breakfast, Yanzhong asks the guy next to him if he's lost his appetite, and he replies he's afraid he'll throw up if he eats anything. They all turn to Yeonjong, calling him Big Brother, and ask if this training is going too far. Everyone agrees, saying they're starting to fear for their lives, barely able to stop shaking. They didn't want Yeonjong to say anything to Cheongmyeong and were begging him not to. They asked Jial what he thought about it. He paused for a moment and said he agreed that the training was getting tougher every day and was pushing him to his limits. Iron gets tougher when hit, but that's not true for people. Still, he figures Cheongmyeong knows this too. For now, he thinks they just need to hang in there, and if things don't change, they can talk to him. The group chuckles, thinking that makes sense. Yanzhong agrees, saying he'll talk to him if it comes to that. Later on, Jewel flops down onto his bed. It's time to sleep and then wake up for another day of training. He thought he could handle the tough training, but he's already feeling faint, wondering if he can keep up until someone calls out for senior brother. He wakes up to see it's Chong Mayon. He says it was tough to find this, but he's giving it to him. Confused, Jewel asks what it is. Then he spots the red light and realizes what it is. It's a plum blossom pill. Our boy tells him to hush, but he's shouting, asking where he found it. Shizhong Mian just says he thinks it'll be super helpful for him and tells him to keep it a secret. Jewel is overwhelmed with feelings. Then Xiang Myung tells him to take it quickly, and he'll help him with his key. Jo Jewel is touched, saying he'll never see the boy as a cold-hearted monster again. Whenever it was time to help, Xiang Myung always showed up. But our boy is grinning mischievously, thinking the real challenge is just starting. The next morning, everyone was training and shining bright. Obviously, our boy must have done the same for everyone else. Yoon-jun quickly noticed something was off. The boys' attacks were way more precise. They were still using the same techniques, but their movements and speed seemed to have improved. Every attack sequence radiated strength. Their upper bodies were steadier, with more muscle behind their swords. He couldn't figure out how everyone had improved so much in such a short time. That's when he remembered our boy asking for a month of training, promising they'd see a difference. Jun started to wonder how just one morning of training could lead to all this. But everyone's eyes were filled with excitement for training. He stayed quiet for a moment and then said everyone seemed full of energy today. He was thrilled to see them working so hard, saying that if they kept it up, he'd let them move on to the final stages. He would teach them the great sword pacification technique. The boys got pumped, saying learning that would be amazing. It really showed they were getting better. Anjum smiled, saying when the boys worked hard, they deserved a reward. That way, they'd learn to push themselves even more. But then Jiang showed up, calling for Anjum. A little later, beyond the wall, Zhang asked what brought him there. Zhang said it seemed like they had a problem. It was the book on the 6-element sword technique that Chang Miao had found. He told Yoonjum to check out the last page, and Yoonjum was taken aback. He was puzzled, wondering what it meant. The message was for the successors, saying there's no shame in evolving and changing Manhua's techniques. Martial artists always push themselves to grow, which boosts their chances of survival. But the 6 elements are the core of everything, and altering this technique is like changing the very essence of the sect. This is something the successors need to remember. Anzu realized that the 6 elements technique had kept Manhua thriving for generations. Just like beginners learn to grip a sword, all martial artists start with the 6 elements technique. He then asked Zhang if they were really planning to teach that again. This technique takes a long time for a disciple to master, which is why a new one was created. Zhang agreed, saying that's exactly why he was there. He knew it was Manhua's wish to revamp the 6 elements technique to make it easier for beginners. However, they also had to heed the wisdom of those who came before them. The trainer believed this was actually much more crucial to consider. The words of past masters show the way for future generations. This is the basis of learning, so they couldn't overlook such a clear warning. That's why the leader sought the trainer's thoughts. He weighed the choice between sticking to tradition or embracing change. After a bit, he mentioned that the 6 elements technique was created because they had limited time. Not knowing when Mount Huo would end, they decided to speed things up for beginners. After all, it was pointless to build a foundation without a future. The question he had was whether the leader now saw a future for Mount Hua. Zhang paused for a moment, thinking about that future. Things had improved, but they still faced many challenges. He then said it wasn't a tough question, which is why he hoped Unjum understood he didn't have a solid answer. Zhang stated that if that was the case, he opposed restoring the 6 elements. The leader then asked why. Zhang looked back and said the reason would be complicated. The technique they developed might have roots in the original, but it was completely different. The 6 elements is a slow, steady art that aims to gradually overpower the opponent. In contrast, the new technique is super fast, nimble, and fluid. The kids picked it up quickly and grasped all its principles. Trying to switch back to the original path now might mean they wouldn't master either technique. Plus, the original required solid footing and intense focus, and he felt it was too late for that. The leader asked him to repeat that, and he said the kids needed solid footing. That's when he noticed something and looked back. Seeing the boys' stances, he realized they had the legs needed to master that technique. Zhang remarked that it looked like Unjum had been training them really well. However, he was puzzled since he had never taught them anything like that. Then he glanced over and saw Chiang Miang scratching his nose, wondering if this was the kids doing. He then asked the leader for permission to get one of the boys' thoughts. He called for our boy, who looked startled. Yun Yung told him to come over because he had a question, and Chiang Miang agreed. Angjum asked him which was better, slowly reaching the highest point or getting there quickly, which was the right path for Mount Hua. The protagonist pointed up and said the right answer was always to aim for the highest point. Yunjum asked why, and our boy replied it's because this is the Manhua Sect. Zhang looked impressed. The boy carried all the pride of the sect's history. It's surprising that such an ideal from long ago came from the youngest member. Zhang Maiyang mentioned that in any other sect, the second option would be right, but Mount Hua was different. To bring back the honor of the past, they couldn't compromise the future. He was impressed that the boys grasped what Ong meant. The leaker asked if this was just because they were from Mount Hua, and the boys said that was his thought too. They shared a look and told him it was okay to go back. As he left, they whispered to each other, feeling embarrassed. They never thought they'd hear something like that from a kid. The only reason he could say it was because he was still young. Yunjum remarked that only a child could express such thoughts. His dreams and ideals weren't yet clouded by reality, and even though it was tough, he didn't want to look foolish in front of that kid. However, that simple chat would lead them to a tough choice. Picking the core technique of a sect was vital as it shaped its future. Heaton told Yunjun to listen up because he was about to make an important announcement as the leader of Mount Hua. From now on, things would change. They'd ditch the changes they made and go back to using the 6 elements technique. On top of that, they would also bring back all the techniques left by their ancestors. As the teacher for the third-year students, he played a key role in all this. They couldn't keep being a weak sect forever. As long as they were at Mount Hua, they should aim to be the strongest. That was the duty and goal of everyone in the sect. Plus, those kids were the future. Because of this choice, he might not see major changes in this generation. But when these boys became leaders, the sect would regain its former glory. While they thought about this, Chang Miao muttered that they were pathetic. Why do these fools dare to ask him stuff like that? He had the food in their mouths, and they were still asking how to chew it. It seemed hopeless for them to ever get anything right. Whatever they were doing, they were probably messing it up. It was time for him to check on Hua's prefecture, because they were likely making a mess there too. He shouted for everyone to hear that the sect was a disaster without him. After years of struggle, the sect finally found peace. The biggest issue, which was money, had been sorted out, and the old techniques were back to secure the sect's future. Everyone was happy, and laughter filled the place. But for our boy, peace felt far away. The city was a total disaster. Sitting on a crate, he asked Zhou Jiao if he really was the son of a merchant family. Zhou Jiao said yes, and our boy asked what it was like to run a big business on this continent. Zhou Jiao replied it wasn't a big deal, just a small shop. Our boy said that as an only son, Zhou Jiao must know some secrets about what was happening there. Zhou Jiao looked puzzled, wondering what he meant. Our boy told him to forget it. They both turned back, and our boy asked why everything was so chaotic. His friends said the chaos was because of the last owners. Even though they were bandits, they treated their workers well, and when they left, everyone vanished. Or you could say they took their families with them. And once one person left, the rest followed. Kyung Mayang then asked if the worker shortage was the issue, and Jo Jiul agreed that was part of it. He paused and added that another problem was the folks at the top of Manhua didn't know how to run these businesses. It was like putting a pearl necklace on a pig. The guys from Manhua were all arguing because they were getting the wrong stuff. Joe Gill said running a business like this wasn't easy. You needed to know about every item and material. If the material was too high quality, they wouldn't make enough profit. But if it was too low quality, they wouldn't get any customers. And if you hired people to manage it, you'd end up broke. Our boys said they could start learning how to run the business. Joe Gill asked if he'd teach a 40-year-old man martial arts, and he said no. He then mentioned that wasn't the only issue. They also struggled when trying to buy certain items. They lacked connections, so if they sent someone to buy something, that poor guy would end up like a beggar and lose all their money. Joe Gill said this whole business thing was really tough and just wasn't working. Trying to manage this place had been a mistake from the start. Our boy looked up and thought about Jangmin. He was starting to see just how important that guy was. Back then, he didn't stress about any of this and everything went smoothly, but he'd rather die than deal with all this pain. He asked Joe Gill what the solution was, and he said he had no clue. If he had that skill, he'd be a successful merchant by now, but not even his dad could fix this problem. It was unfortunate, but there was nothing they could do. To run a business like that, you needed either most of the items or a ton of connections. It would be great if Elder Huang had better finances. Confused, Zhang Maiyang asked who that was. Joel explained that Huang was a big-time merchant, a kind of mogul, who traded all over Shanxi. In the past, he was one of Mount Hua's backers, and his support kept the sect from completely falling apart. The protagonist wondered why he backed them, especially since there weren't any decent martial artists there. He noticed Jojo making a face and asked what was up. Jojo said it was nothing and just mentioned that Wang backed several sects, and if he were around, he'd definitely give them loads of advice on managing everything. Our boys thought the problem was solved then, since they could just ask him for help. But sadly, it wasn't going to be that simple. Huang had been in a coma for over a year. At that moment, Chong Maoyang sat down, realizing it really wasn't going to be easy. Suddenly, someone called for our boy. It was Yun M, and he asked what was happening. He approached the two and said there was a task. He had to head back to the mountain, and our boy asked why. Climbing that mountain was super tough, and he was sure there were stronger, better prepared brothers. He was the youngest here with weak thighs and shorter legs. Yunam, however, told him to stop stalling because he had the least to do. Our boy mentioned he had just finished sweeping the courtyard, for crying out loud. But after spotting the brook and broom, he quickly asked what the task was. Yunam explained he needed to take a letter to the finance office, and it was super important. The letter was from a Yuna exchange company, so he really needed to keep it safe. Jojil warned him that the Yuna exchange company belonged to Master Huang. He then grabbed the letter, promising to deliver it as fast as he could. A little later, up in the mountains, he glanced to the side and pulled out the letter. It was from the well-known Master Huang, likely from one of his staff since Huang was in no condition to send it himself. He noticed the seal and smiled a bit. He knew what he was about to do was wrong, but he apologized to Jiangmin ahead of time. The note was marked for the sect leader only. Still, our boy was curious about what kind of message someone who was bedridden would want to send. He figured they'd be grateful for a little help from him. He opened the letter and took a peek. It got straight to the point right away. It felt wrong to send this letter after years of silence, but he had to do it for his dad. He knew everyone had their time, but his father's signs didn't seem age-related. His heartbeat was off, and his skin had turned an odd shade of red. His father had completely lost consciousness and couldn't move anymore. Plus, a red spot had appeared between his eyebrows. Chang Maoyang seemed to remember the Chiama. They had called in every doctor from across the country, but none could figure out what was wrong with his dad. Out of desperation, he was reaching out to everyone his father knew. He asked that if the sect leader recognized any of these symptoms, to please send a message. And for anyone who could help his dad, they promised a hefty reward in the name of the Unha exchange post. The letter was sent by the vice president. However, our protagonist was shocked, thinking that regular doctors wouldn't be able to help. This illness was known as the demon flower. On the outside, it looked like the person had been poisoned, which is why most doctors searched for an antidote. But he was worried because this illness came from certain techniques used by the demonic cult clan. He gritted his teeth, recalling those fanatics. He thought he had wiped them all out that day on the 100-foot mountain. The issue was that not only had they survived, but they seemed to be gearing up to cause chaos again. What he couldn't wrap his head around was why those jerks had it out for Manhua. Every time they got in his way, He wondered why they had to mess with someone who had helped them, but there was no denying this was a serious problem. He couldn't confirm anything without seeing it firsthand, so it looked like he'd have to pay this guy a visit. Plus, his interest was piqued by the mention of a big reward. According to Jojil, the Yonghai exchange group was loaded. The good thing was that not many people knew about this nowadays. The universe really worked in mysterious ways. Some of those demons seemed to have survived the war. He worried that some of these survivors might catch wind of this letter. Without wasting time, he took off running, thinking he couldn't let this happen. No one in this world could take the reward he deserved, and it was for the good of the sect. He was off to help that guy right away. Night had fallen, and the others were heading back to the sect, worn out. That's when someone called out for Yan Zhang. It was Zhou Jiao looking really worried. The senior was confused, wondering why his friend seemed to be losing it more each day. But Zhou Jiao yelled that it was urgent. It was something else Chiang Mian had gotten into. There wasn't time to explain, so he just told him to follow. When they opened the door, the room was totally empty. Right away, Hyunjong wanted to know where that kid had gone this time. Hyojong said that wasn't the main issue. It was the letter on the bed. The letter said he'd be away on business for a few days. They had to cover for him as best as they could, and if they missed any training, they'd get punished when he got back. Yanzhong had always called him names, saying he was a jerk. Zhou Jiao asked what they were supposed to do now. Yanzhong just told him to keep it quiet. Zhou Jiao said they'd be in big trouble if they got caught, but Yanzhong replied that it didn't matter. They were already in hot water. If he said he'd be back in a few days, they had no choice but to wait. He figured no one was really watching the third-year boys, so maybe they'd get away with it. Poor Zhou Jiao was anxious about what would happen if they were found out, but Yanzhong was more worried about why Chang Miang had to leave for several days. Whatever it was bound to cause a lot of trouble. Meanwhile, our boy was dashing from tree to tree, still on the run. He hadn't stopped for a moment, running all night long. He'd covered 117 kilometers and was finally feeling worn out. In his past life, though, jumping over a mountain was a breeze. He looked ahead and noted it had been ages since he'd been there. The city of Xi'an, a place where a lot went down. Back then, he'd drink there, always in a good mood, thinking it was the best. He was the second in command in the sect, and loved wandering around there because no one bothered him. He was already a bit tips and ended up bumping into a guy next to him. The bottle slipped from his hand and fell, and the guy turned, asking if he had no manners. He told the guy to apologize since he was the one who bumped into him. But when the guy saw he was from Manhua, he said he smelled something rotten. Clearly, Xiamen wasn't happy about that. Drink kept spilling from the bottle, and quietly he told his crew to get ready. The guy was confused and started laughing. He said he already knew they were a bunch of thugs, but he didn't expect them to be so rude. He'd seen many masters like him wandering the city, but they always ended up getting beaten. Plus, it was ridiculous for him to come all the way from Manhua just to stir up trouble in Xi'an. So the guy warned that if Chang Mayang wanted, he could teach him a lesson about stepping into someone else's territory. In that instant, Chang Mayang snapped back to reality. He kicked the bottle up with his heel, and the guy barely had time to react before it was all over. He tapped each of the three guys on the neck. They took it like champs. Chang Mai grabbed the drink, and those poor guys were totally wrecked. The Anghua sect and the Southern Edge sect have always been rivals. You could ask why, but honestly, it's hard for two strong sects to be so close without clashing, especially since they both use sword techniques, making things even more competitive. The ongoing debate about which sect is stronger kept coming up. Because of this, many disciples from Manhua tried to steer clear of Xi'an. Of course, some couldn't resist showing up with their smug grins. It was the ideal spot to sneak away from the elders, have a good time, and drink a lot. He never started fights with the Southern Edge guys. They always provoked him first. Naturally, the bodies started piling up. Eventually, he had to admit those guys had some serious grit. No matter how many times they got beaten, they always came back for more. Maybe that determination is what got the Southern Edge to where they are now. In the end, he knew he'd run into trouble if he crossed paths with them again here, but being who he is, he figured he'd be fine. Plus, the locals probably wouldn't even recognize him, so there shouldn't be any issues. The scene cuts to a doctor checking Juan's pulse. After letting go of his hand, the doctor sadly said there was nothing more they could do. Zhang Wei thanked him and asked if it was really his father's fate to die like this. The doctor next to him mentioned that the Tang family was known for their poison knowledge, but sadly, he had no clue what was wrong with his father. When the son asked what it could be, the doctor said that despite the signs, it didn't seem like a poison. He believed something deeper was causing these symptoms. Zhang Hui grabbed the doctor's shoulder and asked if it could have been some kind of food. Noticing the doctor hesitate, he pulled back and apologized for acting out of frustration. The doctor said he understood and felt bad he couldn't help. Alone in the room, Zhang Gu thought about what options were left. His father's health was getting worse every day. Even with all their money, he felt helpless. His father had always been kind to those in need, but now he was facing death from an unknown illness. Just then, someone called for the vice president and asked to come in. It was an elder from the Southern Edge sect named Mokshanjai. He said he regretted to say it, but it was time to face the truth. The only way to save Wang was through the Tuis ritual. The son said he got the concern but wasn't ready to go that route just yet. However, Mokshang pointed out that it's not every day you get the Tuis ritual done by him. But Zhang Hui insisted he'd wait for replies to the letters he sent before deciding. Clearly, the guy from the south isn't thrilled about that. He claims all his efforts are completely pointless. Zhang Hui is starting to lose his cool with these taunts. He has to put up with all this nonsense because Mokshan is one of the elders from the Southern Edge sect. They've been one of the top 10 sects for a while now, and their reputation is really spreading across the country. Some people even think that in a few generations, they could become the top sword sect. That's why, as the vice president of a trading company, it's tough for him to stand up to someone like that. He knows this guy will probably ask for a ton of money for that so-called ritual. It's not even about the cash for him. If it meant saving his dad's life, he'd give up everything he has. But he's sure that if the Southern sect really had the answer, they would have cured him first, and then asked for the money from his dad, which shows they have some other agenda. But Mok Xiang insists there's no other option. If the best doctors can't find a cure, then it's impossible for him to get better. Just then, someone calls for the vice president. He steps out and asks what's up. The man tells him that a messenger has arrived from Manhua. Zhang Wei is puzzled, since the letter to Manhua was the last one he sent. So why are they the first ones here? Mokshan questions what someone from that struggling sect is doing here. He warns Zhang Wei that there's likely a trick involved, so he should be cautious. He places a hand on the man and says talking to this person is pointless. How could the least significant sect today cure his dad's illness? But Zhang Wei argues they traveled a long way to help, so it'd be rude not to welcome them. Mok Sung just watches and says fine then. In the hallway, the servant mentions that the person is still waiting at the gate. Zhang Wei thinks it's disrespectful to leave someone outside. The servant tries to explain the unusual situation, but he cuts him off, saying that's enough, and they'll go meet this person right away. He reaches the gate, opens it, and immediately apologizes for making him wait outside. He introduces himself as Zhang Wei, the vice president. The person says it's all right since he's not there for pleasantries. Zhang Wei notices the guy has a really laid-back attitude, and when he stands up, Zhang Wei is shocked. It's our boy casually cleaning his ears. He seems a bit confused, and the young man blows on his pinky finger. Zhang Wei then asks when the rest of the group will arrive, but Chang Maiyang simply says he came alone, and Zhang Wei starts to sweat nervously. The boy just states he's there by himself and has a way to heal the old man, so they should hurry and take him inside. Plus, he wants to know more about that big reward mentioned in the letter. Zhang Wei is totally baffled by this opportunist. The room goes quiet as he stares at the boy casually asking for money. He then asks if Chang Maoyang came alone, to which he replies yes. The man wonders if that means it's just him. The boy confirms again. He glances at the servant next to him, who just shrugs, not sure what to do. Looking at the boy, he wonders if Manhua is playing a prank on the Unha Trading Company. But maybe the boy really does have a solution. That's when Mok Sung starts laughing, saying there's no way this sect could be more ridiculous. He approaches the vice president and says he warned him that talking to Manhua was a waste of time. You clearly don't know how to help his dad and sent this joke of a person instead. He thought the leader of Manhua would be wise, so why pull a stunt like this? Chiang Maiyang figures he should have expected something like this at his age. So he decides he needs to convince them somehow and leans in to introduce himself. He's Chiang Maiyang, a third-class disciple from Manhua. They recently got a letter from the vice president, and he's there because he thinks he knows what's causing his father's symptoms. The vice president looks surprised by what the boy just said. He asks if the boy really knows what's going on, and the boy says yes. It's the first time Zhang Wei has heard someone speak so confidently. He's invited tons of doctors and martial artists, but no one had the guts to say something like that. Maybe the boy really does know something. But then the leader of the southern sect steps up saying the kid is way too young to be pulling a scam like this. He tells the vice president to go inside since they've had enough of this nonsense. But then someone asks to speak. With his hand on his back, the boy asks the old man who he thinks he is to talk to him like that. A breeze sweeps through everyone's clothes. Confused, Moksang asks if the boy is talking to him. The boy wonders if anyone else is glaring at him right now. The old man immediately yells, demanding to know what kind of disrespect this is and if he doesn't recognize the Southern Sect's uniform. The boy says it makes even less sense now, since he thought the arrogant man must be some kind of doctor. With all that confidence, he assumes the man has a solution for his father's illness. Moksung stares at him, silent for a moment, then says Master Huang got sick because he strayed from the virtuous path, and the only cure is a two-wis ritual to calm the heavens. Xiaomyang says that sounds pretty convincing, but if it's a two-wis ritual, they should call the Wading Sect or the Kunlin Sect. After all, that's not really the Southern Edge Sect's specialty. Neither Manhua nor the Southern Edge Sect should be doing that ritual. He turns to Zhang Wei and asks if he doesn't agree that his dad needs an expert's help. Zhang Wei is left speechless by the boy's confidence, and Moxiang gets right in the boy's face, asking how he dares to talk to an elder like that. But Cheng Mayang doesn't seem bothered, while the old man is fuming. He then asks the vice president if he's just going to stand there and let this kid stay, but the vice president stays quiet. Then he tells Moksang that this isn't the Southern Sect, as he's just a guest of the Unha Trading Company. In this place, he decides how guests are treated. He calls the boy young master and asks if he can answer a few questions. The boy agrees and asks him to explain more about the symptoms he claims to recognize. Qiao Maoyang says he heard Master Huang often travels for business, and he thinks he got contaminated on one of those trips through the mountain. Zhang Wei is shocked because that never happened. The boy is confused and asks if he's sure his dad didn't go through there. He mentions that his dad was attacked by bandits, and Zhang Wei insists nothing has happened in the last 5 years. Chang Mayang is completely puzzled, asking where exactly the old man got beaten up. But for the son, any hope he had is gone. Mok's son starts laughing loudly, saying he told them it was a waste of time. Manhua's full of bandits, and they're just there to rob the innocent. It was clear that the arrogant kid wasn't there to help. Zhang Gui tells the young master to think about his situation. He gets that the boy might think he can save his dad, but messing things up would just make it worse. Unfortunately, he has to ask the boy to leave. Still, he plans to thank the sect master who sent him. As the door starts to close, the boy keeps it propped open. He mentions that the old man's skin is probably turning red and his body feels icy. Zhang Hui realizes he knows something. Kyung Mayan explains that if you run your finger over the palm, it changes color. Before going into a coma, he must have felt a lot of chills, and some dark spots showed up on his neck between his eyebrows. Zhang Wei quickly flings the door open and asks how he knows this. The boy grins and asks if he can keep going. He feels a sense of pride when the man invites him in, apologizing, but Mok Xian wonders why he's letting a Charlin do this. That info wouldn't help at all, but Zhang Wei asks if he knows anything about it, because it seems he had no way to heal his dad. Mok Song is left speechless, and Zhang Wei says this is where it ends. He doesn't want the Southern Sect involved in his father's healing anymore, and if they push, he'll send a letter straight to the Southern Sect's official. Zhang Wei stands there with a sly grin. With that, Mok Song leaves. A bit later, the boy pulls back the blanket and sees the old man, all red and in really bad shape. Even for him, the situation was worse than he thought. He had a hunch it was this illness, but not that it had gotten so bad. It would be incredibly tough for an old man to last a year with this disease. He takes his wrist and starts using his energy. It flows through the arm, and the boy realizes this is the work of a beginner. Zhang Hui then asks if there's no way to save his father. The boy insists that healing him wouldn't be too hard. Poor Zhang Hui was so disheartened that he thought the boy said there was no hope. Then he snaps back to reality, realizing the boy said it wouldn't be tough, and the boy repeats it to make sure he gets it. At that moment, he had delayed the symptoms, so his father was no longer facing immediate danger. In a flash, the dark mark on his forehead vanishes. Zhang is in shock, but the boy says he needs to prepare some things to cure everything. The son quickly asks what those preparations are. The boy replies that first, he wants a good breakfast. A bit later, he's already eaten a lot, and Zhang Wei is still asking what the real preparations are. The boy keeps munching and saying it's nothing fancy. It's a treatment that takes a lot of energy, so he needs to eat plenty before doing it. And honestly, the cook there was really skilled. Zhang Wu starts to wonder if he can really trust this kid, but after seeing what he did, he has no choice but to believe in him. Then our boy says that actually, his father's condition isn't even the biggest issue, The real question is why he got sick in the first place. To figure that out, he needs a few answers. He then asks who is the person closest to his father. He wants to know about everyone who travels with his dad. Who's the one person that's always by his side? Jiang Wei asks why he cares. The boy says it ties back to the treatment. Jiang Wei mentions that aside from himself, it's tough to say since his dad has a bunch of helpers and staff. There are at least 5 people like that. Jiang Wei realizes it won't be easy to figure this out. He's puzzled and asks why it matters. The boy suggests that Jiang Wei might have already thought about it. The state his father is in shows he wasn't harmed by a stranger. In other words, someone close to him must have poisoned him. Jiang Wei jumps up, saying he won't stand for such accusations. At the Omni Trading Company, they were like a family, and everyone held his dad in high regard. The boy says maybe he's right, and if he's wrong, he'll just feel relieved. He picks at his teeth, telling him not to worry because the investigation will clear things up. He thinks someone with limited skills has been slowly feeding demonic Kai to the old man, starting with no effect until it built up, and then things got worse. Jiang Wei asks how he plans to investigate this. The boy replies he'll just ask a few people, and the vice president can watch. But he promises things are about to get really interesting. Then he changes his mind, saying there's actually one small thing he can do. With his hand on his chest, Jiang Wei tells him to just ask. The boy grabs a bottle and says he wants another one of those Yantai liquors. The scene shifts to Mok Sion, where the old man is so mad he's breaking his chopsticks. He mentions running into a brat with the same name as that other Dan guy, known as the Master of the Fluorescent Blade. The boy talking to him is Isong Beck, who asks if he means the legendary swordsman. The old man bangs the table, asking what this legendary talk is about. He says you can't call that damned bandit a legend. Isong Beck knows Mokshan gets annoyed whenever Manhuas is mentioned. It's been a century since the Master of the Fluorescent Blade passed away, and people still talk about him. This makes him wonder if the guy was really as powerful as the stories say, so he tells Mokshan to ignore this kid. However, Mokshan replies that he can't forget that brat who kept making empty promises. Isong Beck says the kid is just bluffing, so nothing will come of it. But Mokshan has heard that Master Huang's health has actually improved. That's when Isong Beck gets why the elder is worried. Huang never forgets a favor, which means if the boy helps him, it could benefit all of Manhua, and that's something the Southern Edge sect can't let happen. He suggests to the elder that they could make the boy leave the city. It wouldn't be right for the elder to kick the boy out himself. But second-class disciples wouldn't have any issues with it. Plus, no one would bat an eye at a little scuffle between the Southern sect and Manhua. The elder worries they could be accused of bullying a kid from Manhua. But Isong Beck argues that everyone knows about the rivalry between the two sects, so it wouldn't be surprising. They could suggest a friendly duel, and things might go sideways. This is the perfect opportunity, especially with the tournament between the Southern Sect and Mount Huo coming up. Mok Sung bangs the table and says he gets the reasoning but can't let that happen. The kid is just a third-class disciple, and it would be embarrassing for the Southern Sect to challenge someone like him. What would people think if they saw them hurting a child from a fallen sect? Isong Beck replies fine. If the master says so, I'll take it as I don't have permission. He stands up and warns that if any disciple foolishly touches the boy, they'll face the consequences. Mok Sun agrees, promising to punish anyone who lays a finger on the kid. But Isong Beck isn't naive. He knows this is just a show. The reward for doing it will outweigh any punishment. The two then walk away. Mok Sun thinks it's no surprise that young folks today don't respect Manhua. After all, by the time they were born, the place was already in shambles. Back when he was an apprentice, the Southern Sect couldn't even think about facing Manhua directly. If that place hadn't been weakened by the demonic cult, even 100 years later, the Southern Sect would still be beneath them. And obviously, there's no way to go back to those days. One thing is clear. If they sent that boy from so far away, they're trying to make a move in the world again. To him, that sect seems beyond repair. Still, he feels he'll need to talk to the Southern Edge leader once this is sorted out. The scene shifts to 2 guys outside. Go asks Azong what he plans to do with the kid. He replies that he'll politely ask him to leave the city. It's not in his nature to pick fights with a kid, but he can't let him cause trouble for the elder. What he finds odd is why Mount Hua sent a kid like this, since at that age, they shouldn't even be allowed to leave the sect. It seems the sect has fallen so far that they don't have rules anymore. Suddenly, Isung stops and says, "Speak of the devil," as someone fitting the description is right in front of them. Our boy is there, whistling casually until someone calls out to him. They approach and say it's an honor to meet a disciple of Mount Hua. He then introduces himself as I Sung Bake, a disciple of the Southern Edge. Clearly, our boy doesn't care about that at all. I Sung then asks where he's headed. Our boy says he's going to see Master Kwang. He's curious if his condition has gotten any better. I Sung thinks the kid is pretty bold. What was that kid thinking he could do when none of the best doctors have found a solution? He then asks our boy if he has a moment. Sungs wants to know what it is, and the boy says he won't beat around the bush. As everyone knows, the Southern Sect and Manhua have always been rivals, and a big challenge is coming up. Kyung Myung, however, says he hasn't heard about that since he just joined the sect. Iseong thinks now it makes sense. It's because he doesn't know about this rivalry that he has the guts to be so bold. He then says that experiencing Manhua's martial arts firsthand would be super valuable for his training, and he asks what the boy thinks about that. Could the boy show off Manhua's famous swordsmanship? Hae-sung is sure the boy will say no. As bold as the kid is, he'd realize he doesn't stand a chance and would end up getting beaten. However, our boy, straight-faced like Lloyd Frontier, asks if he wants to fight. Hae-sung is caught off guard by the boldness of the cheeky kid. He tries to clarify that this isn't a fight, but more of a friendly challenge. But the boy insists that from what he hears, the guy wants to throw down. Unfortunately for him, the boy never backs down from a fight, but he needs to remember he asked for this. A bit later, they're squared off in the arena. I-sung asks for his Taiwu name. The boy replies he doesn't have one, but his real name is Tong Myung. I-sung nods, saying he gets it. He then turns to the young master and offers some advice. Even if he doesn't realize it, he's still responsible for his actions. That's why he suggests the boy head back to Manhua before things get ugly. But our boy cuts in, asking if they're going to fight or what. Looks like the Southern Sect folks prefer to chat instead of fight, since they're still talking in the arena. Go on the side is itching to jump in and take a swing at the boy too. But I-sung just raises his hand. He starts mumbling to himself, saying he needs to work on self-control. Because right now, all he can think about is how to take down that boy. But he wasn't wrong for feeling that way. There's no reason to hold back now. He reaches out his hand, telling himself it's time to wrap this up. He introduces himself again and requests a duel with the Manhua disciple. But the boy asks him to hold on a second. I-sung wants to know why. At that moment, our boy calls out to the guy behind him, who looks a bit puzzled. He extends his hand and asks to borrow a sword. The two are left thinking how rough things must be at Manhua. How could someone from a sword sect not have a sword? The guy asks where his sword is, and our boy says he didn't come here to fight, so he didn't bring it. He then starts scanning the area, saying he'll just grab a stick. But I-sung tells Gowa to hand over the sword. It would be embarrassing if word got out that the Southern Sect beat up a kid who wasn't even armed. Just then, our boy looks back and the sword lands in his hand. He slings it over his shoulder and says it's time to get going. Iseon asks if he's not going to draw the sword, and our boy says he doesn't want to kill him. Poor Iseon is losing his cool. He says that every time this annoying boy talks, he forgets the peace he's been trying to maintain. He's sure the boy won't change unless he takes some serious hits. He then tells Cheong Myung he's going to take this seriously, because by the time he regrets it, it'll be too late. Our boy tells him to hurry up because he doesn't have all day. I-sung then gets into position and leaps toward the boy, tearing up the floor. Our boy just watches as I-sung comes in for a hit, but he simply places the blade against his arm to defend. However, he loses his balance. At that moment, I-sung lands and jumps at him again. Our boy has to defend himself. He's confused because it's tougher than he thought it would be. Smoke is billowing in the arena, and Go-wee sees that I-sung is really furious. He can't imagine this fight ending on good terms. But honestly, that kid kinda asked for it by provoking them. To him, the boy should just throw in the towel since he's holding on a bit. By now, he must be hitting his limit. He's convinced I-sung could wrap this up whenever he feels like it. But then there's the chance of rumors spreading about them beating up a kid. That's why he's holding back his strikes so the boy can stay in the fight. It's pretty generous of the young master. Once more, I-sung lunges in for an attack and gets surprised. The area erupts, and the boy gets sent flying. I-sung is already worn out, baffled at how this kid blocked him again. He can't wrap his head around how this slow-moving kid keeps blocking his hits. That's when it hits him. The boy was already positioning his sword to defend before his attack even got there. It's like he knew every move in advance, which seems impossible unless he can read minds. He looks at 15, even younger than his own little brother. He thinks again and decides he wants to see if he can block this one. He goes for a big overhead slash, but the boy calmly shifts his foot, positions his sword, and deflects the hit. I-sung realizes again that the boy doesn't seem to be trying hard, which is odd since I-sung is a top talent from the Southern Edge sect. He's starting to lose his cool. His hand starts turning blue, and a gust of wind swirls around him. He keeps telling himself this can't be happening. Then he warns the boy that his sword is going to split the heavens. He charges at him, activating the sky-splitting technique, but Go Wei shouts for him to be careful, or he'll hurt the boy. At the last moment, it looks like Isung pulls back. But when his sword touches Chong Myung's, nothing happens. Isung feels a wave of relief, because if he had gone all out, he'd be in big trouble. But then the boy gets sent flying. Wow, the boy spits out blood. Both are stunned as the boy's body crashes to the ground. The wall is wrecked, and the boy looks half dead. Confused, Isung has no idea what just happened. He's frozen until Go Wei yells his name and rushes over, asking what he did to the kid. Isung tries to explain it wasn't on purpose, but he sees Go Wei picking up the boy who looks out cold. But he's sure that at the moment of the attack, he pulled back his KI. He touched the sword, and suddenly the boy was sent flying. The boy, however, coughs and spits out a ton of blood. Go Wei is shocked, asking what they're going to do now. Poor Isung didn't even know a person could lose that much blood. Now he's convinced he's going to look like the bad guy here. Then someone walks up and asks what's going on. The boys are taken aback. John Woo asks what the people from the Southern Sect did. One of the doctors steps in and says the boy is in really bad shape. They need to get him out of there fast. With that, they toss him over one of the guys' shoulders and carry him off. Isung realizes it's going to be tough to explain this mess. Even a legendary strategist wouldn't find a good excuse for it. Zhang Rui then questions why they, claiming to be part of such a great sect, would use such a brutal move on a kid. He genuinely thought the Southern Edge sect was a noble place. But now he's left doubting that after seeing this pointless violence. He turns to Iseong and says he won't forget what just happened. The boy tries to explain, but Zhang Wei cuts him off, telling him to leave the Unha Trading Company. Just then, someone else shows up, asking what all the fuss is about. It's Mok Shang asking the vice president what went down. Then he spots the sword, a pool of blood, and the wrecked wall. Right away, he realizes those idiots did something really dumb. He tells the vice president it looks like there's been an accident, but the vice president responds, questioning if they really have the guts to call it that. The boy treating his father was nearly coldly murdered by the Southern Sect's disciples. Accident isn't the right word when it was clearly on purpose. Iseong tries to defend himself, saying he didn't go overboard, but Jiami tells him to stop talking and get out of there. It's ridiculous for him to claim it was just a casual spar when it looked like a war zone. And how could it be fair for him to fight a kid who's almost half his age? Is that what the Southern Edge Sect stands for? He then says he's said enough. It's time to round up the disciples and leave the Unha Trading Company. Moxon stays quiet. Then he says they'll do what's asked. He apologizes for what happened, but says the Southern Edge Sect wishes the best for Master Kwang. The vice president walks by and says he'll remember that. However, claiming everyone in the Southern Edge Sect wants this would be an exaggeration. Moksung has to keep quiet. Gohee stands there and Iseong hangs his head. He's about to apologize, but Moksung tells Gohee to head back to the sect and warns Iseong that since he caused this mess, he'll have to stay until they win back the vice president's favor. Poor Iseong stays silent, biting his tongue, but he has no choice but to say he understands. Later in the room, the doctor says the boy is in critical condition. They could try all sorts of treatments, but there's no guarantee he'll make a full recovery. He asks if at least the boy's life isn't in danger, and the man confirms it is safe. He then feels relieved. He asks when the boy will get better, and the man says maybe in about 3 days. Zhang Wei relaxes. Looking at the boy, he never imagined that the only hope for curing his father was now out cold. This kid was the only one who managed to help his father's condition, even if just a little. He realizes that, in the end, this boy is his only shot at saving his father's life, and it's shocking that he was beaten to the point of passing out. Anyone who respected the honor of the trading company would never do something like that. The Southern Edge sect has become way too arrogant. The doctor questions if he really believes the boy can heal his father. It's hard for him to wrap his head around it, but Zhang Wei points out that many famous doctors came and did nothing. Yet, the boy managed to explain the whole illness without even seeing it. Plus, he witnessed the boy actually helping his father's health right before his eyes. He's not just trusting the boy blindly, he feels like the boy was sent by fate. That's why they need to make sure he recovers as best as he can. Night falls, and someone opens the door and walks into the room. A cloaked man looks at Chong Ma-young's sleeping form. He gets ready to attack, saying he has nothing against the boy personally, but this is the price for getting in their way. He raises his hand and strikes at the boy's neck, or rather beside his head. Chong Mayang wakes up and dodges. With a grin, he grabs the man's arm, stands up, and says, "Found you." Our boy is already laughing, asking if the cat got his tongue. The man channels power into his other hand and attacks, but Chong Mayang dodges easily again, steps on his back, and lands on the other side. The attacker notices and throws an explosive, but the boy dodges once more. The relentless assassin powers up another attack, claiming he'll finish him now that there's no escape in midair. He sends a palm strike, but our boy kicks it away. The man is left speechless as Chang Ma-yang lands on the ground, saying he must be pretty confused, then tells him he wasn't the one trapped. Just then, someone walks in and the man turns to the side. Jiang Myong and several guards elements are watching. Jiang Myong says he's fallen right into the trap. Jiang Myong demands to know what the man was doing there. It's Jaebok B. Yoon, one of his father's servants. The protagonist picks something up from the ground and says, "I told you so." He heads to the president's residence and says the person has revealed himself. Jiang Wei admits he didn't want to believe it, but seeing this, he can't deny it. To think his father's most trusted advisor was behind all this, Jaebok asks how they figured it out, but our boy just says he had no clue. He just made sure everyone thought he could heal Master Huang, then got himself hurt to seem vulnerable. Confused, Jaebok asks what he would have done if he hadn't shown up, but Xiong Mayang replies he had no choice. If he died that night, all the blame would fall on the Southern Edge sect. Jaebok says, "So you're teaming up with those bastards?" But our boy just says he's wrong again. He would have found another way to get hurt, but luckily, they called him for that duel. Jaebok mentions he heard the boy had internal injuries and was in critical condition, but our boy just says fooling a local doctor isn't that tough. Then he tells Jaebok he seems to have a lot of questions, but they're not there to satisfy his curiosity. All he needs to know is that he fell into the trap and was caught trying to kill Master Huang. Jaebok stops and starts laughing at the sky. Everyone is puzzled by the madman's laughter. He asks how trying to kill the boy would prove he wanted to kill Master Huang. Zhang Li, confused, asks what he's talking about. Jaebok claims that Master Huang is everything to him. The vice president then asks why he tried to kill the boy. The assassin replies that he believes the boy is just fooling everyone. If the masters couldn't save the old man, how could this kid? John Wei chimes in, saying if he really had doubts, he'd try to talk him out of it, not kill him. Jaebok snaps back, saying the vice president is out of touch and wouldn't believe him. The only way to make the boy see the truth was to kill him. Our boy rolls his eyes at all the excuses and asks if he really has to listen to this nonsense. He then starts moving closer. He channels his aura into his fist and walks toward Jaebok, saying it's time to wrap this up. Jaebok responds with an aura slash, but our boy thrusts his arm into it, getting hit on the hand. He falls down and raises his arm, telling everyone to pay attention. His hand looked just like the old man's cursed one. He explains that this technique is called the Crimson Demon Hand. Being poisoned by someone who masters this technique could easily end a life. Jaebok's attack wasn't enough to take him out, but a regular person would be done for. For someone trained, slowly poisoning the old man without him knowing would be easy, and Jaebok was the only one who stayed close to him and knew this technique well. Just then, John Hu yells for him to be arrested. The men move in, and he orders them to use maximum force if needed. Furious, Jaebok says he was almost done with his plan. Now everything's gone sideways because of that damn kid. Meanwhile, Isung is on some stairs, remembering Mok Sung saying he had to fix the mess he made. He knows this is his punishment for everything he's done. Suddenly, there's an explosion nearby. He's confused. It was Jaebok using a demon palm strike. Chiang Myong comments that Jaebok is dragging him into this. He tells Jaebok to stop making excuses because he'll have plenty of time for that in prison. All Jaebok needs to do now is take a beating and pass out. But Xiang Myong calls him arrogant for thinking he can win. But our boy just says he's actually out of this now. He glances to the side and says help is on the way. Then he calls for Chang Shang, claiming a great hero from the Southern Sect has come to save the day. Cheng Mayang looks a bit puzzled, but our boy urges him to be the hero already. Cheng Mayang points to himself, wondering if they mean him. Our boy gestures with his mouth, telling him to look over there. He spots Zhang Wei and gets it. This was his chance to fix the mess he caused. He knows he can't miss this opportunity and jumps into action. He shouts at Jaebok to get ready for punishment from the sword of the Southern Sect. With that, he starts trading blows with Jaebok. Our boy celebrates, saying finally it's over. But Zhang Wu points out they're still fighting, as far as he can see. Chiang Myong says a rookie can't beat someone who's been training in the Southern Sect for so long. Zhang Hui adds that it's impossible since Jaebok set everything up, but our boy insists he just lowered his kai to curse his hand and show everyone. but it's obvious that Jaebok's skills are pretty basic. Zhang Hui points out that Chung Mayan really is a martial arts pro. The boy jokingly replies, of course, and adds that he's the most seasoned of all the masters out there. A bit later, he's sitting on the stairs, yawning while the fight rages on inside. He mentions it's been going for an hour, and that he should have dealt with it himself. Finally, Jaebok's body hits the ground. Iseong is wiped out, but Sever declares that the jerk has been taken down. Zhang Hui thanks him, saying he won't forget the Southern Sect's help. With that, the boy collapses, showing his appreciation. Our boy steps in, saying finally. Meanwhile, Zhang Hui is confused about what just happened. The issues that had haunted the place for a year got sorted out in just 2 days because of this kid. He can't wrap his head around how it was that easy. Or rather, it's hard to call it easy since no one noticed there was an infiltrator. To Zhang Hui, it felt like a seasoned pro was living in that young boy's body. He then asks Xiong Myong how he figured out Byum was out to get his dad, or at least why he thought Byum wanted him dead. Our boy just shrugs, saying he has no clue. But the vice president insists he planned the whole thing, so he must have a reason. With a sly grin, Chong Mayang says he has no idea, he's just here for the reward. And he knows this merchant group is pretty honest, so they won't try to haggle. But then Zhang Wei remembers a small detail. The reward wasn't for catching the bad guy, but for helping his dad get better, who's still sick. He asks if Chang Mayang can actually do that. Our boy grins and says, of course. Zhang Wei then says if that's the case, he'll promise a reward for Manhua, even if it costs the whole trading company. Our boy is stunned and grabs his hand. Zhang Wei tells him not to get so worked up, but the protagonist asks if he's serious. The old man looks puzzled, and our boy starts whining that the reward is his, not the Sect's. He came here, put in the effort, so why should Mount Hua get the reward? Zhang Hua thinks this kid is stranger than he expected. A little later, our boy knows he just needs to heal the master now. The plan has gone perfectly so far, and he enjoyed embarrassing the Southern Sect. But the real challenge is about to start. He's not entirely sure he can cure such a serious illness. Sure, he told them he could, but he's not completely confident. That's because the body he's in isn't the master of the fluorescent blade. If the demonic chi starts attacking the old man's body while he tries, he could die in that state, but he has to give it a shot. He asks Master Huang not to hold it against him if things go south. Energy starts flowing through his arm. He creates a small Chang Maoyang made of floating energy. Our boy now faces the demonic Kai head-on. Thousands of snakes are swirling around the old man's body. Even though it's demonic energy from a rookie, it's spread all over. And he doesn't know if his energy will be enough to get rid of it. The snakes move forward, and he knows he has to give it a try. He starts cutting through the demonic Kai. Outside, his arm is slowly getting purified, but then he gets thrown off by something. That one strike he made opened a gap in the middle of the demonic Kai. He begins to feel hopeful that he might actually pull this off. That's because his body is filled with the purest ki anyone can hold. If he had taken in any other energy, he'd have at least 10 times more by now. It's exactly because he has only pure energy that fighting the demonic one is easier. Now, the real question is whether Master Huang can survive this internal fight. He keeps attacking and breaking down all the ki while urging the old man to hang in there just a bit longer. He's almost finished with the job. He delivers one last attack, but then something surprising happens. The snakes start to retreat from him. He wonders where they're going. When he opens his eyes, he sees the old man's body. All the demonic Kai had gathered in his head. Trying to heal the old man's head directly is way riskier, but leaving him like this isn't a good option either. If he pushes forward, the old man might die, but if he pulls back, he will definitely die. The choice wasn't easy, but it had to be made. Given the situation, he decides to take the direct approach. With that, the spiritual energy heads straight for the old man's head. But instead, he uses his own body to draw the energy into himself. His hand turns red and his whole body starts to crack. Man, he pulled in way too much demonic energy. He drops to his knees, refusing to underestimate it. A master of the fluorescent blade shouldn't go down from something so foolish. But his vision begins to blur. His consciousness starts to fade, and he tightens his fist, vowing not to pass out here. If he blacks out with all that ki in his body, he'll definitely die, especially since a child's body is way more fragile. He assumes his spiritual form, looks at the demonic ki, and challenges it to come at him. The snakes strike again, but he dodges, steps on them, and moves toward them. One slash opens a rift right through the middle of them, but once more, they come in to bite him and manage to trap him. But the head gets dislodged, and he appears from within. However, he starts to wonder what's going on. The demonic Kai inside him was moving way faster. He slashes at another one, but realizes he can't keep up with their movements. That's when a swarm manages to attack him again. Another flash of light, and he tears through all of them. Something had shifted. The demonic Kenny seemed to get aggressive because it knew it was being trapped, and now the fact that he had very little energy left was a problem. Since this fight dragged on, he wouldn't stand a chance. The curse was starting to take over his body. He dodges another attack, but another one comes in midair to grab him. Mandy takes the hit and is dragged away. He tightens his hold on the sheath, but then he drops the sword as another snake bites his arm. Another one sinks its fangs into him, and the poor kid is getting overwhelmed. With all the bites, he's completely stuck. He has no choice but to use his last option, something he was hoping to avoid, because it would take a toll on his body. He starts to open up all the energy points in him, and suddenly the sealed aura begins to spread out. As the energy fills him up, he causes an explosion in each limb. The energy surge is painful, and he feels like his body is falling apart, but the curse is slowly lifting, and finally a demonic key seems to escape from him. The poor kid collapses to the ground, completely cleansed. His small body is even giving off smoke. He opens his eyes, grabs his chest, and shakes. He quickly gets up, saying it was a close call. He almost didn't make it this time. He figures he better not try that again, since it had way more demonic energy than he could handle. While he thinks about how lucky he is, Huang starts to wake up. This catches the kid's attention, and the old man turns his head, asking who's there. Xiaomeng says, finally awake, and when asked who he is, he replies, let's just say I'm your savior. The old man wonders if he's already in hell. Our boy tells him to cut the rudeness. Once Master Huang is awake, everything goes back to normal at the Yuna Trading Company. If Chang Meian hadn't figured out Jaebok's plans, he would have wiped out the whole family and taken the company. After some insistence, they find out that Jaebok owned another trading company that went under because of Eunha's success. But our boy doesn't care. Everyone has their said stories, but that doesn't give them the right to be criminals. All he wants to know is how that guy got the Crimson Hand. The man says he found a dead body with some scriptures nearby. To Chiang Maiyang, that was a bit of a letdown. But it's better this way because if it really was the demon cult, it wouldn't have been so easy. Either way, he hears from the master that the cult wasn't involved, so it's a happy ending. As the company's savior, he gets honored with a banquet. He enjoyed all the food and drink he wanted, since those guys had plenty of cash. While he's happily singing, someone outside tells him he should get some rest. It was Master Huang who mentioned that when he fell asleep, he was in worse shape than he is now. He comes in asking permission and checks if the boy is Master Chang Meiyang. Now a bit chubby, Chang Meiyang asks if the old man doesn't remember when he woke up. Maybe he has put on a few pounds since then. Zhang Wei says the boy ate his weight in food in just 3 days. The chubby man then asks how he can help, and the old man says he'll get right to it. He apologizes for being forward, but wants to ask something of the young master. The old man starts to kneel and bows, asking if he could please accept his gratitude. It's thanks to the boy that he's still alive, and he doesn't know how to repay that debt. Still feeling nervous, the boy insists there's no need to bow. But the old man says he doesn't know how to repay this debt, yet he'll do his best. All he wants is a chance to make it right. He tells the boy to ask for anything he needs without holding back. But the boy replies that as someone who follows the virtuous path, he can't accept anything for saving a life. Accepting would bring shame to his sect, especially since he's here without permission from Manhua. The old man looks a bit puzzled by this. The boy explains that it was such an urgent situation that he couldn't wait for the sect's go-ahead. The old man's eyes brighten, asking if he really went that far for him, and offers to keep this a secret from the sect. The chubby man grins and asks if he's sure they won't spill the beans. The old man confirms, and Chung Ma-young quickly pulls out a small notebook from his shirt. Master Huang asks what it is. Armoy says it's just some notes, since his memory isn't as sharp at his age. The two look confused by this age talk. Master Huang then asks what the notes are for. The boy flips through the pages and says, "Didn't you say I could ask for anything?" Then the master starts to get it. That little notebook has everything the boy wants, and the chubby man asks if they can get started. Later on, Jiangmi asks his dad how he's feeling. He lifts the cup and says it's strange, but his body feels lighter than ever, like he's 10 years younger. Jiangmi finds all of this really odd. But then his dad asks if there's something on his mind. Now that he's feeling better, he knows his son isn't just there to chat about that. The son hesitates for a moment. He calls his dad and then refers to him as president. He mentions he heard his dad plans to end talks with the southern sect and offer a big reward to Manhua. His dad agrees. Once again, Zhang Wei hesitates. He reminds him that the southern sect is the biggest power among all the sects in Shanxi. They'd be turning their backs on such a strong group and teaming up with Manhua, which is practically broke. This could be really risky, even if it's to show gratitude to that young boy. Looking at the whole situation, he thinks the reward is a bit much. However, if his dad insists on going through with it, he should at least keep talking to the Southern Sect. The old man slams the cup on the table and asks what a merchant's main job is. John Wee looks a bit uneasy, searching for the right words. Then he says a merchant's role is to make deals that follow the virtuous path, boost the local economy, and contribute positively to the country and the world. His dad spits out his tea and starts laughing, saying that's a pretty idealistic take for the vice president. But those are just nice words because he knows the truth. A merchant's duty is to make money. They need to prioritize profit above all, even if it means going against the virtuous path sometimes. If a merchant wants to do good, they do it with the money they make. For someone in business, money itself isn't good or evil, so the focus is just on efficiency. Zhang Wei asks if he got it right. His dad's plan is to profit from the bankrupt Manhua, but Master Huang questions if he's forgotten how his dad built the trading company up. It's all about spotting chances, seeing something undervalued with huge potential and jumping on it before anyone else does. Whether it's a martial sect or another trading company, Zhang Wu knows that's how his dad turned Un into the biggest company in Shanxi. Still, he insists he doesn't see why they should invest in Manhua since it seems hopeless. But then he thinks of the boy and realizes it does have potential. He agrees that right now, Manhua can't hold its own against the Southern Sect. But if it keeps growing like he thinks, they just need to maintain a solid relationship, and they could see an unbelievable return on this investment. However, the son can't wrap his head around it, saying it only confuses him more. If Manhua doesn't succeed, they risk losing everything since there's no guarantee. But the father says Zhang Lu is speaking out of ignorance. A merchant isn't just someone who bets on good outcomes. They'll make Manhua thrive. The plan isn't to wait for the sect to grow by itself. He'll make sure Manhua rises again. In his merchant life, he's met tons of people, but none have impressed him like that boy. It felt like he'd been searching for something old. And suddenly, he was awakened by a dragon. Regular folks like them struggle to understand martial artists, but he didn't need to understand. Just trust that the truth would come out eventually. If the rewards he gave the boy built a connection, the company would have to succeed. To him, this was a small price for success in life. Zhang Wei, though, hesitated, asking if it was really that small. The old man fell quiet and admitted the boy took 5 times more than he planned to give. He cursed that the kid really knew how to negotiate. The son smiled, saying he didn't know why, but his dad's mind was already made up. If that's what he thought, he was happy to follow his lead. But he still wasn't fully convinced. That's why he'd give his all every day to push his doubts away. And personally, he'd make sure Manhua found its way to success. The father noticed and said he was glad to hear that from his son. Meanwhile, Chang Maoyang knew this master had another reason for investing so much. A merchant like him wouldn't just hand out money out of gratitude, but he didn't care much about what the merchant wanted in return. After all, he could ignore any requests a merchant made. A kid might feel indebted, but he was an old man and didn't care about that. That's when someone approached the chubby boy. It was Iseong, who stopped right in front of him. Our boy asked what he was doing there again, but Iseong pulled out a sword and handed it to him. He assured him not to worry, saying he meant no harm. But if he could, he wanted a rematch. Another duel, but this time for real. He realized he'd been used as a pawn to expose that man's true intentions. Our boy said calling it a trap was a weird way to put it since he knew Iseong was trying to lure him out of the city, but he was willing to let the past stay in the past. He just wanted to know what this had to do with them fighting again. Haisung explained that he felt humiliated, was in real danger, and had been used in the boy's schemes, but he accepted it was his own fault for falling for it. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about their practice match before everything went down. He still couldn't wrap his head around what had happened. Our boy asked if that was why he wanted another fight, and Iseong nodded. He admitted he had no clue, but he already knew the boy was way stronger than him. What he really wanted was to figure out what went down that day. Chiang Myung seemed to find it interesting that this guy wanted another fight after being embarrassed. He thought Song was looking to take revenge, but this was unexpected. He warned Iseong to think it over or he might regret it. But Iseong just smiled and said he was sure. The two then squared off in the arena. Iseong couldn't believe how small the boy was, about 10 years younger and clearly a level below in martial arts. It felt like his second-class disciple could take on a third-class one. That odd gap made him shake and sweat. Even though he was older, he felt a heavy pressure. It was like standing in front of one of his sect's elders. Logically, someone so young shouldn't have such a strong presence, but he figured he had to see it for himself. Kyung Ma-young then commented that Iseong was sharp. He hadn't even done anything yet to scare the guy, but he could already sense his power, which showed he had a lot of potential. Young Ma-yang realized the boy would take time to catch up. He knew that the person in front of him was the type who would get way stronger the more they trained. Maybe one day, he could even become the strongest swordsman in the Southern Sect. And if that was the case, Chang Ma-young was ready to teach him a thing or two. He raised his hand and told him to come. Isong got his sword ready, flicked it aside, and cracked his neck. Our boy recognized that as an illusion technique, but it wasn't something you usually saw in the Southern Sect. Isong then warned him. He realized there was no way he could win. That's why he had to go all out with his best move. Shadows of his hands started to appear, and he warned Chang Ma-young. He was about to use the 12 snow petal strikes technique, but our chubby boy didn't look pleased and called him a bastard. Isong then lunged forward, activating the technique. Our boy watched in anger, and he went right through it, breaking the sword and sending the guy flying. The boy was left hanging in the air. Before he could hit the ground, our boy was already there. He grabbed him by the shirt and lifted him up. Cursing him again, he demanded to know where he learned that technique. This tall centipedal stuff was ridiculous. The rest of the world might buy it, but it wouldn't fool him. That's because this was a technique he knew inside and out. It was one of the ancient core techniques from Manhua, called the Dispersal of Petals, a move that had even been lost within Manhua itself. So why was this guy from the Southern Sect using something like that? Isong, barely aware, mumbled that he finally got it. The gap between him and Chang Ma-young felt like staring at a ghost. The poor guy was starting to lose it, wondering if this was what dying felt like. After a while, he opened his eyes. He found himself in a hospital, all beaten up. He tried to sit up. Kyung Mi-yeon told him they were treating his internal injuries and he'd heal soon. Iseong still didn't get it, but Kyung Mi-yeon was already asking about the technique, the 12 snow petal technique. Iseong confirmed that was the name. The protagonist couldn't believe they had stolen such a technique so openly. Even worse, no one had noticed, not even in Manhua. That's because no one remembered how those techniques used to be. He then asked who taught this technique, and Iseong said any disciple past their second year could learn it. A kid asked if even the elders were using it. Iseong replied that as far as he knew, the elders had learned it. Right now, it was only being taught to first and second degree disciples. This piqued Chang Ma-young's interest. If not all the elders knew this technique, then one of them must be teaching it to the disciples, confirming that the jerk who stole Manhua's techniques was still alive as an elder of the Southern Sect. It was clear what had happened. When Manhua was attacked by the demon cult, hundreds died on the 100-foot mountain, leaving few survivors, mostly kids. They probably got some help. Someone likely showed up, shouting to save the Manhua disciples, and the Southern Sect warriors jumped into action. Xiao Maoyang had long suspected something like this. After all, it would be shameful for any martial sect not to help another under attack by the demon cult. The issue was that, while pretending to be allies, some techniques had been stolen, and maybe the rest of the books weren't burned by the demon cult. A century ago, they sacrificed everything to save the land from this great evil, yet they were betrayed by those they saved. The worst part was that they stole the technique and renamed it Snow Petal. He stood up and told Azan it would be better for him not to learn that technique. Azan, confused, asked why. Chang Mi-yeon smacked him on the head and told him not to question it, just to follow orders. They fell quiet, and Chang Mi-yeon explained that it was a technique he would never master. The poor guy was still lost. Our boy was fuming and would have hit him more if it weren't for the fact that he had helped him discover all this. He then explained that the Southern Sect's techniques focus on sticking to the basics. Because of this, those practicing it feel like everything is slow and heavy, but it gets way stronger the more time you put into it. However, this snow petal technique went completely against that idea. If Isom wanted to be a real martial arts master, he needed to ditch that knowledge. A sword strike with too many variations didn't fit the Southern Sect's philosophy. He asked if Isol understood and stared at him, but the poor guy was still clueless. Arma was furious that he had to teach the guy his own sect's philosophy, but then he wondered why these fools started creating a variation they couldn't even master. That's when he paused to think. Maybe he was the reason they had gone so far. At least that was the thought that crossed his mind. In the past, he used to roam the city, beating up all the Southern Sect disciples. Surely, the members there had taken pride in their techniques until he showed up and started taking them down. Maybe this made them doubt their own skills. What they didn't get was that martial strength comes from the person, not just the techniques. The weirdest part? They might not even realize they were using Manhua style. Iseong looked at his hand, thinking about his sect's philosophy. But then he turned around and said he was leaving. Iseong called out, but the guy just told him to forget everything he said. No one else could decide the path he should take. Sure, advice could help, but he was the one who needed to make his own choices. That's why he had to pause and really think about the direction he wanted to go. At that moment, Iseong got up and thanked him for the insights. The guy turned around, smiling, and then left. Iseong stood there, thinking how strange that all was. It felt like he had met a wise sage from Noel. But outside, the guy was already plotting to head to the southern sect and take them down. He looked up at the sky, talking to his brother Jamu, saying those jerks had taken everything from him. How could he keep his cool? If he were as strong as before, he'd be right in the middle of the sect, but that wasn't the case now. First, he needed to get stronger fast because the martial world runs on strength, and those guys messed with the wrong person. Meanwhile, back at Mount Hua, someone was tapping their feet, worried he might have been robbed or worse. Yan Zhang said, since Zhang Mayang had been missing for 7 days, something serious must have happened. Kyul hoped it was urgent enough for everyone to forgive him. Apparently, Kyul got called in by the leader again, hoping they weren't in trouble. Onjun heard someone yelling that the kid was super disrespectful. It was Hyang Yang saying the brat had been gone for 7 days, and he was just a third-class disciple. He told the leader this couldn't just be ignored, or how would anyone respect the sect? Sang told him to chill, saying it might have just been an accident. But Haiyan Yang insisted that even if it was an accident, it happened outside the sect, and he didn't have permission to leave. His friend argued that maybe he fell in the mountains. He turned to the leader, asking if they could send a search team. But the finance guy wanted to know why this third-class disciple was allowed to wander around freely in the first place. Another guy slammed the table, telling him to stop questioning the leader's choices. The complaints kept coming, saying they were overstepping and breaking all the rules. The elder paused for a moment, then opened his eyes and said, "That's enough." The finance guy jumped and quickly sat down, apologizing. The elder wondered if he had been wrong to trust that kid, but it felt odd since the kid didn't seem like the troublemaking type. Yoonjum stood up, saying he'd gather a group to start searching for him. But then someone yelled that he was back. The elder immediately opened his eyes and asked who it was. Someone shouted the brat. Chongyang was walking toward the gate. Everyone rushed over, asking if it was true, and someone confirmed it. The elder hurried out, saying he had to see for himself, but the finance guy told him to hold on. The elder asked what was up. Yang Yang said he knew the leader was worried about the kid because, despite being so young, he had done a lot for the sect. The elder urged him to get to the point. Yang Yan then suggested not to be too hard on the boy, or it might discourage the other disciples. At Mount Hua, they were taught to follow the right path. That's why even the most valuable discipline needed some rules. The leader breathed a sigh of relief, saying he wouldn't forget that. More than anyone, he wanted the boy to have a bright future and stay disciplined. But then Yunim said that wasn't enough. Ignoring orders was a big deal, and he should be sent to the cliff cave for at least 6 months. The leader was taken aback, saying the boy was just a third-class disciple and still learning. But you might have argued that a fair punishment was needed. The leader asked if everyone agreed, and all the elders nodded yes. He relaxed and said fine. Bonham wondered what the boy had been up to. Finally, our boy walked through the gate. As he looked ahead, he saw the 5 elders coming toward him. He greeted the leader respectfully. The leader watched him and called him over, immediately asking why he had been away for so long. Our boy simply said it was unavoidable, but Yang Yan told him to stop being so disrespectful, since he was just a third-class disciple. No excuse he gave would be good enough. The sect master then told him to explain, but warned him about the consequences. Our boy looked a bit uneasy, and someone asked for permission to enter. The finance guy was surprised. It was the folks from the Unha Trading Company asking for likes on